Astronauts to the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 3. Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we have a problem.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
What you're seeing here is a mirage. Mirage.
What's going on, everyone? It's jeranism, back with a live video for you tonight. Got a good show for you, I hope. Thanks to those in the chat for joining us. Thanks to those of you, I don't know, at home, in your car. Special shout out to those upside down from me, down under. And a shout out to the perpendiculars too. You know, Africa. And, oh, I know somebody else who's perpendicular right now. That would be Bob. Bob, are you back from the store? Bob's not here. Bob went shopping. Bob is living the good life over in Hawaii while we all struggle through this toil. So he'll be back. He'll be here shortly. But he's perpendicular right now, so at least that's what he says. And with me tonight, I got two guys who haven't got off to a stellar start, but, you know, that's how some things go. We'll see what happens. But by the end, we will be further apart, or who knows exactly, maybe closer. We'll see. First, someone I've known for 2+ years. I've enjoyed his work. Enjoyed, for sure, hosting Glowbusters with him, which is, by the way, returning Sunday, 12 noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, and 9 in Hawaii. And that is John the Morgile. John, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, man? And you know, I hate to use the term stellar start or even anything to do with that because it has so much, I don't know, negative connotations to a flat earther. But honestly, you know, I've spoken with IPS once. I think that was on the Glowbusters, and we had a pretty good conversation. I don't think it went awry in any sort of way. So I wouldn't say that we have gone off to you know, like off the rails right off the beginning, but yeah, you know, there's a few things that we probably need to hash out, and so I'm glad that we're able to do this sort of in an open forum, you know, as gentlemen, as adults, and not as you know, childish people sometimes do in internet land. So yeah, awesome stuff.
Good, that's the hope. And so with us also, we've got a guy I've known for just a few months. I did have him on Raw for 3 hours. I called into his show. Definitely making a splash around the plane. And, you know, he's either loved or hated, it seems like, and he is IPS from Infinite Plane Society, also known as Mark Sargent and Matt Boylan. What's going on?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jared. And yeah, I'm glad to be able to speak with Morgile. We actually spoke a couple of times. I think once was on Candy's show for a few hours, or it was about 20 minutes actually. But
yes, that's right. Yes, you're right. Sorry about that. You're right.
We were talking about different psyops and what kind of claims we should make, which claims are irresponsible to make. But anyway, I thought it was a productive conversation, even though we didn't quite agree on everything. And lately, I've been making an effort to reach out to people who are basically setting themselves up as like opponents or something when we're all on the same side, as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm willing to really talk to anyone, even people who have said horrible things about me and those who have made weird insinuations or whatever. It's like, we can clear it up with a phone call far faster than making videos that, you know, don't have that instant response.
Oh, you mean like calling people cowards from behind a computer screen? You coward.
Right.
It's like, is there any more cowardly thing to do than to call somebody out from behind a computer screen? It's like, yeah, that's the way you would go about it. So yeah, I do appreciate you guys both saying yes. It was my idea, and I'll just start with my opinion on the matter, and then we'll take it. You can take it or leave it, and we'll go from there. But as a flat earther, because I recognize that in front of me is a huge mountain that I have to climb the coming weeks, months, years, and so it's not going to be easy. And I've always known that John's going to be along for the ride. I've known that from real quickly into this whole thing, that the flat earth can't go anywhere with people like John and me here. And he's a fighter, but I've always kept my eye open for other people. Always you got to look and hope that more people come along. You'd think that's going to happen. As we keep talking about it, you think more people are going to be becoming channel owners or video makers, and they are. They're coming up all the time. And so when I first heard about IPS, I checked him out, thought he was interesting, thought he was a little bit different, but listened one night, and I could hear it in his voice, to me, that he was a flat earther. I could tell that, and I started to understand how he runs his chat and why he has his rules. And so because I like to look into people, I had him on my show, I went on his show, and I came away with thinking, okay, welcome this guy to the awakening. Do I agree with everything that he does, the way he does it? I don't. I don't think that I agree with everything John does. I don't agree with everything Bob does. My goal is kind of to allow that to happen, that people are going to be different. I think it's something that's missing for some reason, that we all think we've got to be the same. We got to have the same beliefs. If you don't believe in the Holocaust, but I do, but you don't believe in dinosaurs and I do, I don't think it's an important thing, because people are different. They're going to have different opinions, and part of life is listening to everyone else. So I'll ask you in a moment, though, one question to start it off, IPS. And this is something that John brought to my attention through his video about you, and I think it's an important question to ask. And some other stuff was definitely some misunderstandings, I think, and but this one thing was a good point. So my opinion is and remains that if a Masonic Brotherhood or the Jesuit Order or anybody like that thinks that by placing people in places where they're speaking out about flat Earth, that's a good move, I think it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and they're dumber than I thought. Hey, thank you. But the reason that this has been hidden for so long, in my opinion, is because of ridicule, is because of subversion, is because of education or indoctrination. It did not get hidden by sending people out to talk about flat Earth. They didn't hide flat Earth by making people go out, talk about it, and then shoot up a school. Why? Because the last thing that anybody wants that's at the top of this is for anyone talking about the Earth being flat, because it's one of those awakenings that when you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's got to be the scariest thing in the world for these elites. So I could be wrong. I'm totally saying I could be wrong, but I'm personally not worried about the flat Earth. We have an uphill battle, and no matter who or what they throw at me, and I cannot see these guys putting people anywhere in a public forum to talk about it. It just doesn't make sense to me. So, flat Earth isn't going anywhere. In my opinion, it's spreading quickly. There's no curve, there's no spin, there's no globe, there's no moon landings, no 24/7 ISS. Oh, you know what? I'll show you that too if you want to see something hilarious. The ISS today, and it's been going on for, I don't know, I guess now about 15 hours, has not shown at all the Earth or the sun. It's pointed it to a weird. It's just so ridiculous that we're paying $53 million a day, and we can't even get a live feed 24 hours a day. Now we can't even get a picture of the Earth for the last 15 hours. I'll bring it up in 1 second. But so yeah, just to end it off, the one question that John brought up that I think is very important is, aren't Masons bound by an oath with the expense of your tongue for giving any secrets out? So my question to you to start off would be, how are you no longer a Mason? How is that even allowed? And does it mean that you have certain secrets that you can no longer divulge? I mean, that would be my question to you. Or how is it that you were able to break away from something that we're told has with it a oath that, can cost you your tongue?
Yeah, good question. And it seems to me that there's something of a straw man that has been created within the conspiracy or alternative research, where the word Mason or the Freemason has become kind of a universal bad guy, always a conspirator. They're all holding secrets, and they're all murderers who kill each other over secrets. And I'm like, show me the dead Masons. Show me the penal codes being enforced. And what I see with Masonry, because I've joined other groups because I've always been a truth seeker who's believed that you have to really, like gonzo journalism, you have to get into the story. You can't be on the outside looking in. And so I've always been unafraid to actually go to the source. And so I've I've joined the Church of Scientology. I've joined the Abbey of Thelema, Builders of the Adytum, Freemasonry. And yeah, you do take oaths. But if you don't pay your dues and you stop showing up, no one hounds you down. And the secrets that you give or you're supposed to contain are publicly accessible from your local library. And my reason for leaving the lodge is, one, it's racially segregated, and two, the candidates, the initiates, the members, they swear to keep everybody who's not in the lodge ignorant of whatever secrets they do have. And that really runs contrary to my nature. I didn't join a lodge to become like some kind of elitist scum that looks down on everybody else as ignorant. Not quite the opposite, in fact. You might even say I had mercenary intentions because I was joining it to find secrets, to find the stuff that they were hiding, and to learn and then use it on my own. So it wasn't like I was looking to join a club. I'm certainly not like a club joining type of person. Same with Scientology. I was investigating Scientology by taking courses, reading their books. And so I do think that for the most part, Freemasons have become a straw man, and it's kind of disconnected from the reality. And I've never heard of a Mason having their tongue cut out, their guts ripped out, burned in the brazier, scattered to the four winds, or had someone tied with a rope around their neck and then nailed to a stake next to like the ocean tide where they get drowned. I mean, I've never seen any of the penal codes enforced. I mean, have you?
No, I can't say that I have. And I understand what you're saying about research too, because
What about the rum guy? What is it? James Morgan.
Captain
Yeah.
Morgan. That's like
Yeah.
the one example, but to me
Yeah,
it's
but,
no different than
there's
when
one.
like anti-Muslims will say, oh, well, if you leave Islam, the punishment for apostate is death. And maybe you might have honor killings here and there. Maybe an apostate from some radical sect might be killed here or there, but it's certainly not the rule. And as far as the penal codes in Masonry, they do not enforce them. There are no throats being slashed for some guy joining what is essentially like a bowling club. I mean, it's like a bowling league. It's just a bunch of old retirees hanging out. They're not involved in that kind of activity as far as I've seen. And so I would say the burden of proof is on the person making the claim that it's a cult of assassins, backstabbing, murderous assassins, to prove that. I mean, the oaths are intended to be, I believe, more or less a psychological ploy, a bit of fear, a bit of groupthink, basically saying, hey, if you cross the group, you're screwed. But to me, it's groupthink, mind control. I don't believe there's any real substance to their oaths.
Well, and I agree with you to some degree that Freemasonry, at least in the past, has been demonized, because if you look at most people who were scientifically literate, and we're talking practical science, like even, for example, Dr. Samuel Rowbotham, who, if it weren't for him, we probably wouldn't have a flat Earth movement, love or hate the AE projection. But honestly, like most of what was used to launch this thing in the modern era, and even in the early 1900s and stuff, was all based on his work. And apparently Dr. Rowbotham was a Freemason. And what this goes to show isn't that he was like trying to take over the world. What it goes to show is that people who were educated and who wanted a career in either architecture, engineering, science, that sort of thing, they became Freemasons. That was the way that it went. And we still have that to this day in terms of fraternities and colleges. I mean, it's a very common thing. And so, yes, I agree that Freemasonry has been demonized to a degree, but there's also another side of Freemasonry, which I'm sure that you obviously know, if you've made it to the 32nd degree as you've claimed, is that the Blue Lodge, or the neophytes, or the initiates, the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry at least, are given sort of a false understanding of the virtues of Freemasonry, yet are misled into believing that they have a firm understanding of these virtues, and it's later revealed to them, either sub rosa, or if they're clever enough to figure it out, but at some point it's revealed to them that their interpretations of the symbology and the rituals and even the virtues and dogmas of Freemasonry, they were 100% completely misled. And just sort of backing up, because that was one point that you made, and I do agree with you that Masons have been demonized. I mean, it started out as it seems like a practical thing where builders, we're talking in Europe and stuff, and feudal systems where builders, people who knew how to build, were able to travel across boundaries that were otherwise impenetrable by peasants, by the peasant class, and that would be enforced by like royal guard and stuff. And so Freemasons necessarily had free passage. That's why they're called Freemasonry, and they necessarily had secret handshakes and secret meetings and secret coalitions with the powers that be, if you will, in order to make it possible for them to have free passage. And so Freemasonry was the perfect womb, or the perfect matrix, to ultimately be overtaken by psychopaths and royals. And it seems like that did happen at some point. I know Freemasons trace their origins back to Hiram Abiff, who allegedly, designed the Temple of Solomon, and who really knows about that. But they really do claim to trace their origins, at least allegorically, back very far. Now, let me back up real quick and say that I seriously, honestly love and respect all flat earthers and globe earthers if they're genuine. I mean, I don't love or hate anybody because of their understanding of the world. Now, I do know that genuine flat earthers have gone through a very personal and private and intimate process, and sometimes a bloody struggle with themselves, to come to the unshakable, unequivocal conclusion that the Earth is not a spinning sphere, that the heliocentric model's wrong. And I feel like awakening people to this truth is really far from being just along for the ride, even if it's just one single person ever. And I see this as a spiritual battle, where each and every soul is really quite precious, and everyone was once subjected to the very same programming as all of us. And it's, in my opinion, we have to try to reach out to people personally, because the Flat Earth Awakening is a very personal process. It's not something that you're going to, like, for example, and I'm not dogging this at all, but it's not something that you're going to see on a billboard and then realize, wow, the Earth is flat. Like, it really takes a great deal of scientific study, observation, and really reconsidering everything that we thought to be true our whole lives in terms of theoretical physics. I mean, it really is quite a process to become, to transit from a globe Earth believer to a flat Earth realist. Now, in terms of something you mentioned, Jared, like where it seems ridiculous to place whether it's Jesuits or Freemasonic or J-Trig or CIA assets speaking out about flat Earth, I mean, I totally disagree. I mean, look at just one example. During the women's liberation movement, one of the loudest voices was Gloria Steinem, and it turns out that she was funded and backed by the CIA the entire time, and she was speaking out about women's liberation. And so it makes perfect sense to me that they would do that, so as to not only gatekeep, but also to sort of control the conversation and to provide the public, not necessarily the grassroots movement, but to provide the public with a version of the truth, which is sort of an effigy or a straw man version of the truth that still allows for the status quo to continue with very minor adjustments without disrupting the beast system as a whole or rocking the boat very much. And so to me, it makes perfect sense that, quote unquote, they would put agents into place to commandeer the conversation, and also, especially in the days of the Patriot Act, to publicly associate flat earthers with all sorts of inherently, demonized and ridiculed groups of people, including, but not limited to, domestic terrorists, or even just, science-denying idiots. I mean, we already know that that's what they're doing, but the last thing that we want to do is give them any more excuses. Now, One of the things that you mentioned, IPS, is that the Masonic, teachings and stuff are available in a public library. I'm sorry, my friend, but that's either you just don't know what you're talking about, or that's a bold-faced lie. Every at least Grand Masonic Lodge has a library in it, and many of the books are specifically for Masons that are given to certain levels of Masons, which are either returned to the lodge while the Mason is still alive, or if he dies while it's in its possession, it's returned to the lodge upon his death. And so, there are lots and lots of books that are specifically for Masons by Masons that are absolutely not for public consumption. And, finally, I would just add to that too, that I just find it very difficult to trust somebody who has taken not one, not two, not three, but 32 different blood oaths, which basically say that they agree. I'm not necessarily saying you, but they in general agree to have their bowels removed, to be buried to the neck at low tide in the tidal waters, to have their bowels removed, to have their tongue cut out, to have their throat slit. I mean, and it gets just more and more bizarre to where they're like boiling your organs up to the higher level degrees. I just find it very and I've heard these stories from Masons where they say, oh, that's not enforced, but what's the point of the ritual? And, honestly, to most Blue Lodge Masons, I know a lot of Blue Lodge Masons, and they are decent, hardworking people whose father was a Mason, and they're contractors. They're either brick contractors or, roofing contractors, but it's well known that if you're in a Freemasonic lodge, even at the level of Master Mason, like the lower level Masons, you'll be privy to certain contracts that otherwise you wouldn't get. And so there's benefits to it. And these Blue Lodgers, these neophytes, these initiates who are intentionally misled about Freemasonry, provide the perfect cover for the inner core of Freemasonry. And I got to tell you, I mean, anybody who's researched the truth movement at all in any detail will realize that Freemasonry, may be one small integral part of this, although there are many other facets to the New World Order beast system. Freemasonry is an integral part of this. And so, and I don't mean to detract from your credibility, ipso facto, but unfortunately, I just find it very difficult to believe anything that a person claims when they claim to be not only a 32nd at least degree Freemason, but also a practicing witch. And to liken Freemasonry to a bowling league or higher level Freemasonry to a bowling league is also deceptive. Yeah, I agree. Based on the conversations that I've had with Masons, my grandfather was actually high up in a HEPA, which is a Hellenistic sort of fraternal order, so it's very similar to Freemasonry. That yes, at the lower levels, it is sort of like a bowling league where you have to pay dues every month in order to stay, in the clique. And yes, you do get there's benefits to it. However, it becomes obvious if you read people like Albert Pike, if you read people like Mackey or like Manly P. Hall or Crowley. It's very obvious that the higher levels of Masonry are into some very bizarre stuff, and they intentionally mislead their neophytes. And it just really brings it really raises some questions to me that you would make claims like the Masonic books are public knowledge when a lot of them are not. And finally, the last thing I'll say, and I'll let you respond, is that to get to the 32nd degree of Freemasonry takes a great deal of effort, takes a great deal of money, dedication, also smarts. I mean, you're certainly no dummy. You're obviously a very intelligent person. And I would say that it is indicative of just a bit more than showing a minor interest in gonzo journalism. So I'll leave it at that. And, if you want to reply, feel free.
Sure. First, let me mention the billboard. There was just a billboard that went up in Oklahoma City, and it says testingtheglobe.com it's a digital billboard, by the way. And I wouldn't minimize that whatsoever, because I wasn't looking for flat Earth. I was doing a painting of a statue of Atlas, doing research, and Mr. Thrive and Survive's video popped up, and that piqued my interest. And that started me going down the rabbit hole. I really think that the idea is that strong, that powerful, that jarring, that one single exposure to flat itis can literally get the ball rolling. It can get you actually looking down that path. And even a conversation can start it. So I don't underestimate the power of memes, mimetic infiltration, billboards, radio ads, however people want to transmit this information. I know it takes a while to actually understand it. It takes a lot of research, dedication. People fall into the rabbit hole, so to speak, but it does take that initial contact. And I can't think of any better way than a billboard for capturing somebody's attention because it's so out of place. Now, as far as Freemasonry goes and the oaths and all that, it's really no different than like you said, college fraternities. There's a bit of drama, a little theatric, because the lodges were formulated at a time where they could have faced death. You know the story of the Templars, right? The idea of being burned as a heretic. If you're trying to survive in an underground sort of way where you're trying to avoid the authorities, you're trying to avoid the Inquisition, whatever it is, it would behoove you to have these types of oaths to scare away the people who aren't serious, who aren't dedicated. But to me, the oath, the blood oath, as scary as they sound, it's a non-disclosure agreement. It's a security clearance. And you can't really say that Masonry is a monolith any more than you can say that all corporations are evil. It really depends on the individuals in that specific group. And I don't think you can equate Masons with Illuminati. I don't think they're the same thing. And as far as Masonry goes, I don't believe that they're secretly worshiping the devil. There's that Leo Taxil hoax where he claims that they actually worship Lucifer. No, they don't. They worship the same God as all the other Abrahamic faiths. If anything, I mean, I would call it a secular humanistic religion, but I think that they get a bad rap. It's mostly a straw man, and I think that it's not very objective to imply guilt by association. A number of people could say that your grandfather's involvement with that particular organization would condemn you. So I don't know about guilt by association as being something that we should utilize in our search for the truth, but we should actually look at the actions, not impugning somebody's intentions, because you can't really know those. You can only judge them by their actions.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely true. And you mentioned about having the digital flat Earth sign, and I agree. But just ask yourself a question. You don't necessarily have to answer this, but I mean, do you honestly think that most people are as intelligent or introspective as you are? Because I mean, I've listened to you enough to know that you're very intelligent and introspective, and I just don't think that the average population, 90% of people who are they're not stupid or unintelligent, but they're just totally plugged into the mainstream narrative. Really, there's maybe 75% of people still believe that 9/11 was exactly like the commission report. And so when that's the target audience, I'm not saying that billboards are a bad thing. I never had anything against the billboard, but just thinking about it in such a way to where yes, we want to get as many people looking at this as possible, but the internet is such a huge place with yes, there's lots of good information, but there's lots of very terrible information, and then of course misinformation. And perhaps flat earthers aren't as coordinated as we should be, but the truth belongs to everybody equally. So it's not like anybody can patent flat earth and get a nickel for every time someone says it. I mean, that's ridiculous. At the same time, though, I just don't see, because I know for me personally, it took me 6 months to even look at flat earth after I had been introduced to it. And then it took me about a week of some pretty hardcore, experiment, introspection, and revisiting of what I thought to be true. And I just don't think that, and maybe this is just me being pessimistic, but I just don't think that the majority of at least American culture is prepared to go down that rabbit hole without a very good guide. And finding something on a billboard and then Googling, is flat earth real, and then finding the Flat Earth Society, well, guess what, half the people are done. And so whether that's maybe there's no way around it, but I think that one of my overarching points is that flat earth simply just cannot be introduced to the public via the mainstream media, because regardless of your intentions, with the billboard, your intentions may be to get flat earth in front of people, but if the mainstream media picks up on that, they're going to do so in such a way where it's presented as complete folly, nonsense, incredulity, and they do this very successfully, to where it's almost like something like a billboard works against us in the masses. And yeah, maybe you'll turn a few people onto it, but and we'll get into this later, but I honestly had no problem with the billboard whatsoever. I just have issues with the narrative itself. So unless you had anything else you wanted to say, or Darren, if you have any comments, I had just sort of a little a little rant that I wanted to do, and then some questions.
Let me say hello to Bob real quick. Bob's here. Bob, you there?
Bob.
I am here. Hello, guys. How are you?
Hey, long time no see, man. It's been like 3 weeks. What's up?
just hanging on Maui, loving it. It's absolutely
Rough life.
You bastard.
yeah. Somebody's got to do it. Watching all the beautiful girls in bikinis, it's tough.
Oh, thanks. That was good too. Appreciate that.
So I did want to make one comment really quick about Freemasonry, and I don't know a lot about it, but I can say that I have been talking to somebody in the community, believe it or not. I won't say his name or anything, but he was telling me that he was actually in the ranks of Freemasonry long ago, and he told me some stuff that really kind of blew me away. And maybe I can, IPS, you can confirm a little bit of this, but he said something to the effect of, the first few degrees when you actually get into Freemasonry, those are the ones that you really have to study and do memorization for. And after you get past those first, 4 or 5 degrees, I believe he said, after that, you can kind of buy your way up into the ranks until you hit 32nd degree. He said, in fact, you can do it so rapidly, it's almost ridiculous. And I was really surprised to hear that. So, he told me, he goes, when you're in the ranks, anything below 33rd degree or 32nd degree, anything below 33rd degree, so 32nd on down, he said, you don't know anything. Yes, you take all the oaths, but you're not included in anything. And of course, the 33rd degrees, we all know, is by invitation only. So I just thought that was kind of interesting for one. And like I said, I won't mention his name, but because this community is so ridiculously crazy. Every time they hear the word Mason or Freemason, automatically you're soon to be a shill and whatever. And I think that's a little bit overboard, a little bit overkill for sure. But so IPS, is that true what he told me, that basically the first few degrees are the ones you really have to study for, and after that it's kind of a matter of buying your way up?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a misconception that it used to at one point. It would take a lot of time, energy, and effort, but they've changed it. And maybe it's because membership's dwindling, but it's not the same as it used to be. Huge generation gaps. And so you go through your first 3 degrees where every line of every oath is told to you mouth to ear. You're not allowed to write it down. You have to memorize it. So you go through your first 3 degrees over a period of, depending on how fast you are in memorization and your scheduling. I did mine in like 6 months total. Now, the Scottish Rite, which is degree 4 through 32, those are carried out over the course of a single weekend. And it's much more passive. You're essentially sitting in a theater with a domed roof with the stars above and a stage in front of you. And at some points you participate in certain roles. Maybe they throw you in a coffin or whatever. But for the most part, it's a spectator thing. And you stand up, you swear an oath, you watch the play. It's a bunch of biblical mumbo jumbo, a lot of stories. It's all theater. It's theater. It's what it is. And you do it all in a single weekend. And as far as the money, it's like maybe $500, if that. It's not that expensive. And it just means that you're going away for a weekend. You come back, you're 32nd degree, you take your picture on the stairs with all the old men with your funny cap with the double-headed eagle. And it's all done like that. In fact, a lot of Masons are pretty mad about it, how sometimes in some lodges, they will do 1st through 3rd degree in a single day, which is totally against tradition. Doesn't require the same effort. So, yeah, it's not what it used to be. I would say it's even anachronistic in many ways.
Huh. That's interesting. Very interesting. Okay, well, yeah, that's exactly what he was telling me. So, yeah, it sounds like this is kind of pretty much what anybody can do. And I did know a guy a long time ago that had just joined it, and this was like, 10 years ago. And basically, he said he was doing it for the business connections. He goes, when you do that, usually you get in with a bunch of guys that are fairly, high up, sometimes in business ventures and whatever. And of course, it's a good old boys club, he said, and they basically stick together. And so I guess I can kind of see that. And then the other thing I wanted to comment on is as far as, like billboards and stuff like that, I think that the billboard effort, yes, people are going to see it. There are some people that are going to actually investigate it. And, John, you're right in some degree, because yes, there are always going to be those that ridicule us no matter what we do. Whether we shoot up a guy on a water powered rocket or whatever, or any other type of publicity stunt. The idea, I think, is to get people talking about it. Even the interview that I just recently did, and Mark, that is still at actually the #1 most read article on Denver Post Online, the Denver Post thing. There are, I don't know, like a lot of comments, or somewhere around 1,500 comments, and we're very heavily ridiculed. So, and we did our very best. And the article, I have to say, was presented, fairly evenly. So we're really kind of at the mercy of what the media is going to do to us. So, but the idea is to get it out in the open. And as a result of doing that, if it hadn't been for the billboard, then the Denver Post would not have contacted John Vanuck and then Mark Sargent and then myself. And, that, of course, turned into an interview from CNN. Now we have interest from HBO. Several media outlets want to do pieces on Flat Earth. And they may very well be absolute and complete total hit pieces. In fact, I almost expect that from CNN. But for those, for every several people that completely dismiss it and us as lunatics, there's going to be a few more people that actually look at it and go, why does this keep coming around in our face? Why is it constantly making media headlines? Why? And they're going to look into it. And at some point, there's going to be a certain percentage of people that actually convert and actually can contribute something else to the movement. So, I tend to agree that, even though we may not like some of the publicity, ultimately it's going to, I think, affect us positively, just because of the fact that it's out there in the public consciousness.
I totally agree. I think that Flat Earth is absurd. It was absurd to each one of us when we first heard it. John, you compared it to the women's liberation movement, which I think is so night and day, because Flat Earth is something that they've needed to hide at every level. And it does them no good to put it into people's minds. Once it's been into people's minds, then they might start uncovering the biggest deception ever. I mean, of all time, this is the biggest deception that there ever was. So I think it's one of those things. That's why when I hear the media is starting to pick up on it, things like that, well, I think that's what would happen, right? If you started to hear that people on a round Earth are going back 2,000 years in history and believing it's flat again, that's something that's going to stir up the media. And there might be some certain hot topics that the media is not allowed to hit, right? They're not allowed to cover. They got to get clearance. They got to get okays. But I think when it comes to this, they might be doing the story because it's absurd. It's absurd that people are going back in time and believing something that science has proven unequivocally is false. Now, we know different. And we know that by just getting the right people to look into this, I think it can move much, much faster. I mean, we can keep doing videos every Sunday. We can keep putting out videos. It's really going to be stuck there for months, years, unless somebody who's big, somebody who's got a couple $1 billion, and I'm certainly not saying to give it to me or to send me on any trips. A person who has money, you go do it. Go fly to the North Pole. Go fly to the South and take these trips. And I think that the more it gets out there, I don't see a problem with it. I mean, as much as I agree with you about, the billboard or anything else, that they're going to take it and they're going to make a mess of it, just like they did with Kyrie Irving, just like they did with Shaq, just like they did with Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo. Anytime somebody comes out and says anything about it, it's going to be put in a negative light. That's just it. But the great thing about this movement is they can't knock it down. It's kind of like I told Jesse Spots a long time ago when he was so worried about this. There's no trees on flat Earth, and what are you going to do when the geologists come now and ask about? It's like, I don't care. I'm not afraid of anybody who comes, because we simply can demand for them to show things like curvature. We can demand for them to prove these things that they've been telling us for years that they can't prove. And if they can, well, what the hell have they been doing for 2.5 years? So to me, it just seems like this is so different. Flat Earth is so different. I don't think we can compare it to anything. There's nothing we can look at and say, well, they did this in this case, they did this in 9/11, they did this with this false flag, because never before has there been something that somebody just starts looking at and it fits everything they've seen their entire life. They start remembering things. They start, I get emails all the time from people who who just say exactly that they just heard it one time, thought it was ridiculous, but then their life started to uncover before them and everything started to make sense. And then the thought of somebody being upside down on the opposite side of the earth, being held there by some gravitational force which pulls spheres to the center, which we've never seen in any test or any experiment ever. And then they fall into that period of time that you talked about, John, where you go through a week or 2 weeks where you're up all night and you're stressing, and you break through and you come out the other side as a flat earther and you don't go back. And so I think that I'm open to getting that info out any way possible, even if it means that the Masons are sending people in to speak that shit. That's the dumbest thing they've ever done, because they're just giving people an idea that they otherwise wouldn't have had. I mean, that's why this didn't go anywhere in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, because nobody was speaking about it, so nobody could uncover the truth, because none of us would have just magically fell into it. It took a series of events that people were reopened to this truth. Thank goodness for people like Robotham and others that kept the hope alive, because I think we're really close. We're really close right now. I put out a video recently that some of their augmented reality is so close to being real that I don't think we can really tell anymore whether or not what they're showing us is real or fake. However, we can go back the last 40 years and realize that it's all been faked, and you don't fake 40 years worth of space footage if you can go to space. So anyway.
Right. And, I guess what I would say is Flat Earth sort of has to be a grassroots movement, or what'll happen is the mainstream will just tear it apart, twist it, manipulate it. And they've had at least 70 years to set up a contingency plan to deal with a flat earth awakening. And I mean, I understand, yes, you can't compare flat earth to anything. It really is totally unique. But the analogy that I was making with Women's Lib more had to do with controlling the conversation as opposed to like keeping a secret. But the main point is controlling the public conversation by providing in that case, Gloria Steinem with a platform, funding, media propaganda, promotion, in order to be sort of a, the big voice or one of the big voices in that movement. I mean, it's also come out that, like Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead were also paid for by the CIA. And so it's like the whole 60s counterculture, the LSD counterculture, appears to be a massive CIA operation. And so, there's really no telling what lengths they will go to in order to control the conversation. But, again, it makes perfect sense that, okay, if they know that flat earth is already out of the bag, that they're going to try to get in front of the story so that they can contain it as much as possible. And whether that's putting us in a dome or putting us inside of a sphere or, whatever the case may be, I just think it's important that we don't allow the mainstream media to control the narrative, at least in the the majority of the public eye, because flat earthers already know the truth. You're not going to change a flat earther's mind about this, but we're talking about the majority of people. And so go ahead,
John. Just out of curiosity, I mean, I don't know how we can not let the mainstream media control the narrative, because they're the ones that are reaching millions and billions of people. So that's kind of the thing that we're at their mercy to do this. The best thing that we can do, I think, is to kind of put our best foot forward, and just do the very best we can do. Like when the Post was there and he was listening to me, I was trying to make sure that I said everything correctly. I didn't come across sounding like some complete crazy lunatic any more than they would normally perceive anybody that believes in flat Earth. But I mean, we're kind of at their mercy. I think things that really hurt the community, in all honesty, is when you get flat earthers of a certain notoriety that really start acting crazy. And I won't mention any names, but we all know a certain individual that just kind of went right over the edge recently. And that
which one?
Well, let's just say you've had an altercation with him before.
Okay,
which one?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
So I mean, and that's the thing that, if anything, can make us look really bad, not only to the larger mainstream outlets, but to the rest of the community in general. But as far as what the Denver Post said about us, I mean, I talked to the reporter and I told him, I said, look, I go, I don't know. The guy was still in Yale. The reporter was still in Yale, and I said, I realize you're just in school. I don't know how much you really know about what goes on in the world and the politics and all this stuff. But I said, this is something that obviously is a subject of criticism. They make fun of us. I told him straight up. I said, I don't believe that they're really going to let you be completely objective and fair on this article, because if it appears in any way, shape, or form that you're actually kind of promoting or getting behind our message, then that's going to bring you even more ridicule than it does us, at some point. So they have to be very careful what they put forward, as far as, trying to be supportive of us, even though I had the impression from the reporter that he had done a lot of research, and if I would have had to guess, I would have thought that he's very interested and maybe even starting to believe in it. So, and I'm not, going to try and speak for him, but that was just the impression that I got. So that's really where we're at. And of course, then he's got to submit the story to his editor, and his editor's going to, make the decision, well, this is either going to make us look really bad or whatever. But see, they want to keep it in the realm of kind of like sensationalism, something that's clickbait, that they could sell a lot of copies. And that's fine. I don't care about that, as long as they don't, kind of come out and try and make us look any worse than the general public would already, perceive us, at first glance. Because let's face it, you mention the words flat Earth, and people go, "What are you, a lunatic?" Obviously. So,
right. I'm trying to do away with it out of my vocabulary. Like, honestly, I'll use static plane Earth or non-spinning globe, just because flat Earth has so many. There's so much stigma attached to just the phrase itself. So, weaponized term.
Have you guys been watching Finding the Curve at all?
Finding the Curve.
It's am I saying it right? It's a documentary that somebody on YouTube has. I think they've done the first 3. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's
I watched one of them, I think.
Yeah, it's just really good. It's just exactly what we're describing. It's people that when you first say it are screaming back at you that you're crazy, that you're insane. And over the course of these 3 episodes, I'm not sure if they've had the 4th one. I've only seen 3. But some of his closest friends that he's just been talking to are starting to see. And that's what I think so many people haven't had a chance to do, is when you watch that, you get to see it happen right in front of you, and you remember what it's like to uncover each thing, because it's something we all went through that we forgot about. Like when somebody told you the Earth was flat, and you said, no, there's pictures, and you go look, and then you see the pictures for the first time, and you look at every one of them, you're like, son of a bitch, these are fake. So, these, I can tell that they're fake. And then from there, somebody says there's no satellites, and you're like, are you freaking kidding me? Of course there's satellites. Our phones and then they tell the guy in the kitchen, do you think there's cables underneath the ocean from the the East Coast of America? He's like, no, there's no cables. We use satellites. Look it up on your phone. He looks it up. Watching these people go through that, it reminded me of going through that myself. And all those steps are what makes me a flat earther. So many people ask me, what's the one proof? What's the one thing? I don't have one proof for one thing. It's uncovering each of these things and learning that I was lied to. That what did they, flaunt satellites in our face for, all over the place, telling us how they are basically responsible for every bit of communication that there is. And then you find out that really there's nothing that needs a satellite. Nothing. That our cell phones are done through ground-based wires, and that they're done through cell towers and the landlines. And then you realize, like, okay, that's a lie. And you learn about the water going down the opposite hemisphere. And you hear that's a lie, and you're like, why did they teach me that? So I just think there's so many things that people have to go through, and it's hard for us. I think the hardest thing about me is when I make a video, I think everyone in the world that's going to see that video has seen every other video I've done, and that's not the case. Sometimes they're seeing it for the first time.
Right.
That's hard to remember. I'm sure, John, you have the same issue, that it's just hard to think that way when you're making a video. And I just think there's so many people along so many lines, so many places on their path, that when I see somebody else doing something different than I do, and people are gravitating to that, then so be it. Because a lot of people don't like me. People hate my voice. I get told everything. So I want them to have as many options as possible to find this truth for themselves, because it's like you said, though, John, they need a good coach through it, because we all did, and we all had to, we all remember exactly the video that made us turn that leaf, or I don't know. I just think it's such an important truth that I want people screaming it from every way. And there's people out there. Yeah.
At the same time, though, like, I mean, I know countless people that have have realized flat Earth and taken it to their teachers, preachers, parents, brothers, families, loved ones, everything. And 9 times out of 10, they get rejected and scolded, and they're not really able to articulate the points. And so, like, even in your close group of friends and family, it's almost impossible to get like an actual conversation going. And so just multiply that by 1,000,000, because I mean, unfortunate as it is, most people are just simply not very good researchers. And not to say that we shouldn't try to advertise it. I just think that, like, I don't know, for example, I had a back and forth conversation with a college professor via email. And if we can reach one single person like that and they actually get it, to me, that's like, I don't know, possibly that's worth more than 100,000 people seeing a billboard. Because really, out of those 100,000 people, how many people are going to research it? And then out of that cross section, how many people are actually going to find real good information? And then out of that cross section, how many people are actually going to dive down the rabbit hole and come out the other side of flat earther? I mean, it's very few. And of course, I'm for things like billboards. I totally am. I just think that we have to be careful about allowing the mainstream media into this at all, because their job is a mouthpiece of the government, and it is necessarily to twist facts around in order to steer the general public away from the truth. And if they have to roll out Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Bill Nye, then that's what they'll do. And we can ridicule them all day long, but that's who most people idolize, worship, and believe, is the ones wearing the white lab coats. And so, I mean, if we can reach out to more of the actual white lab coats and get them on board, I think that'll make a big difference. Might take some time, but I don't know. I mean, it all seems to be a bit of a lost cause, but we're making progress. I mean, look how far we've come in the last 2 years.
No, I don't think we know enough right now as far as the response that the billboards, the newspapers, the media is going to get, because this is I think it's breaking new ground. But it's a cliche to say that there's no such thing as bad publicity, but if you look at the 2016 election, you look at Brexit, you can see that the mainstream media were getting everything wrong because they're agenda driven. And nobody behind the billboards or any of the media appearances has any illusions about swaying the media. We're not trying to win them over. We don't need approval from Anderson Pooper Scooper. We are using their platform to get the meme out into the mass consciousness, because it needs to be a grassroots awakening. And I think we can trust in the common sense. I think that people are a little more capable of research than we might give them credit for. It's just that they're so compartmentalized. And I think once they're shown certain facts, it'll comport with what they've already seen. Many people have already experienced the evidence that would show them the world is flat, but they just didn't know it at the time. I've spoken with retired pilots. I've spoken with people who were in air defense who noticed anomalies their entire careers, but until they heard the words flat Earth, they didn't put it together. So I don't shy away from the F word. I say it's flat. I say it in all caps. And I don't have any illusions whatsoever about the mainstream media, because it's the globalist media. They are the spokesmouths for power, and their job is to hide this. I just think that we need to use those platforms, infiltrate it, in order to make this thing grassroots, meaning get the words bouncing around. And I think once there's enough people aware of it and talking about it, the people who have the minds, the knowledge, and the experience to actually make some headway into this they will be dragged into this. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to drag more minds into it. The more minds, the better. Truth is its own defense. We're not trying to convince anybody to new belief. We're just tearing down the illusions and getting them to say, wait a minute, fake news, fake science. Why do we trust NASA? Once we get people recognizing, because look, the trust in the media is at an all-time low. They had everything wrong. All of their polls were wrong in 2016. They spent the entire couple of years attacking Trump, saying he couldn't win, saying he was a deplorable, a xenophobe, a sexist, a racist, a bigot. And look what happened. He still won. And that's because the people's media, the grassroots, the YouTube and the Twitter, has more influence than they do. We are the new media. The mainstream media is dead. It's just a corpse. So right now, I just see what we're doing as we're just using their platforms. That's all.
Yeah. That's absolutely true, and that's the whole thing, John. I mean, John, I know what you're saying by we don't want the mainstream to necessarily control this, but like I said before, we don't really have any choice either. In fact, we all know that there's going to be a lot of media at the conference, and they may come out and paint us as actually the craziest bunch of people ever. But again, you're right. We're not trying to convince them. We're trying to get the word out, and if it is done by putting it on billboards or sending Mad Mike up in a rocket to do a publicity stunt, kind of like what Evil Knievel used to do, stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that no matter what the media says about it, they'll be looking at the event and they'll be looking at the message and they'll either be thinking to themselves, "Wow, these guys really are flat-tarred idiots," or they're going to be going, "Gee, I wonder what all the hubbub is about." So again, you're right. We're not trying to convince the media at all. We're trying to just simply get recognition. And the mainstream media, like it or not, they're the ones that are able to spread a message out to hundreds of millions of people, even if it's a negative message. So,
right. Well, the thing is, though, the mainstream media, whether it's Fox, MSNBC, or any of the so-called opposing forces media, they always have a clear, concise message that they repeat. And yes, while social media and alternative media may seem to have a larger voice than the so-called mainstream media, I think that's a little bit of a myth, if not just misinterpretation of the data, because there are literally millions and millions and millions of channels on YouTube and millions of Twitter accounts, whereas there's only 6 corporations that own the mainstream media. And so they always keep their messages concise, and they have a narrative that they employ false dichotomies and stuff, but they have a narrative. And so in that sense, they do affect a really large portion of the population by a consistent narrative that they use to their advantage. And on the other hand, alternative media, there's millions of channels, and there's so many different, theories and opinions and channels and different points of view, and just like so many. I mean, people can go to YouTube for everything to, from how to fix a carburetor to how to conjure Lom, like Aleister Crowley did, or whatever. I don't know. It's everything, A to Z. Whereas the mainstream narrative, especially with the news, it's always going to be, they're always on the same point. They don't stray at all from their narrative. And so in that sense, they have a much more, well-oiled machine of propaganda, whereas social media is way more compartmentalized. And, so I think it's sort of a false equivalency. I mean, I do see what you're saying. Yes, social media has its power, but mainstream media still has a leg up because, well, not only is it global, in quotes, but it also holds very heavy sway on many, many people. Even lasting as far back as the 60s and 70s with the Apollo missions. I mean, many, many people still believe that because they saw it on TV. Now, one thing that you had mentioned, though, IPS, and I do have some questions and stuff listed out, and I had a few things that I wanted to say, but I mean, you're sounding all well and good now, but it wasn't even 3 weeks ago where you were basically saying that you're not really sure if the Earth's flat, and you won't say it's flat unequivocally. I just find it very troublesome and hard to believe that someone would come forward as a proponent for flat Earth unless they knew it balls to bones that the Earth wasn't a spinning sphere. And so I'm just curious as to, has something changed in the last 3 weeks, or?
No, I was making the point that a more readily defensible, intellectually secure position would be to say, I'm a shape agnostic, I'm a ball agnostic. Because to say it's flat unequivocally, yeah, I know it's flat. I know there's no curve, but I'm saying that I'm not married to a particular model. I can't show you a model. I can't 100% say this is a model that works, but I'm absolutely a shape agnostic. I think you can make an easier case that the Earth is stationary than that there's no curve from where we are. No, I have no problem with that. And I don't euphemize it. I don't call it a non-spinning plane. I call it flat Earth, FLAT, all caps. And as far as the mainstream media, if they had the power that they used to have, Hillary Clinton would have won. Brexit would have failed. Trump would not have won on a nationalistic ticket. And I think that the same wave that brought about Brexit, this anti-globalism movement away from global warming, I mean, the public's faith in the media is at an all-time low, despite what the Anderson Cooper Scoopers and the Lion Brian Williams will tell you, or Megyn Kelly, the other Sandy Hookers. They tell you all these things, but it's not true. And I
Well,
think we're riding that wave towards globe exit. I think that the mainstream media is dead.
That's true, and I agree with you, but at the same time, they still hold sway. So, like, for example, people are still subjected to it, and they use a lot of repetition. And the fact that Trump won, I think, was a direct result that the media and the Republican Party disowned him because, frankly, it has nothing to do with alternative media. People are awake to the fact. Just look at the political history, just in terms of presidents in the last 20 years, starting with Bill Clinton's blowjob all the way to today. All right, there was no possible way that Donald Trump could have been elected if he was endorsed by the mainstream media or the Republican Party. And so in that sense, yes, they are despised to a point that they still wield power because by shying away and blackballing, and they still gave him a lot of attention. It wasn't like the situation with what's-his-face, Ron Paul, where they just totally pretended like he didn't exist. They gave Trump tons of media attention. And, you know, I really think the cliche that all publicity is good publicity is true because, again, it was all bad publicity against Trump, but people are awake to the fact that, okay, so, Bill Clinton got impeached because he got a blowjob, and then, we got George W. Bush for 8 years, and we immediately got the war that they wanted for 8 years. We're still in that war. Then we got Barack Obama, and we're still in that war, and things have just gotten worse in terms of financially. And so we've been from, before Clinton, it was a Republican, then Democrat, then Republican, then Democrat. And so to go back from, the extreme leftist, almost socialist, definitely corporate fascist regime of Obama, to sort of run away from that back to the right, people aren't that stupid. I mean, we're not mice. And so, yes, I'm sure alternative media had something to do with it, but I got to tell you, there was a lot of alternative media stations who were promoting the crap out of Donald Trump, and now they're backing away from it because it's just more of the same. I mean, look at his cabinet.
So John, don't you see that what you're saying though is if the media is starting to be that distrusted, then I mean, what do you think people are going to do when they come out and start saying flat Earth is ridiculous? Isn't that kind of because they're going to try that.
Touche. Yeah, touche. Yeah, good point.
So I'm just saying that maybe there's a chance that's what people will see. Is I'm thumbing through the comments. I know you can't see the screen, but I'm just looking at the comments of the video that was Megyn Kelly talking to Alex Jones in that interview on NBC News, and it is unbelievable to go through these comments and read the people just lashing out at NBC and at Megyn Kelly for being fake news and the way that they went about this interview. And you can have your own opinion about Alex Jones or Bill Hicks, whatever you want. But the point is that this is something that 5 years ago would have been filled with comments from people saying, all right, get that conspiracy theorist, way to go. It's clearly the times have changed. I talk all the time about the thumbs up, thumbs down on the Bill Nye sex junk video, which, I thought when I saw it, I said, oh man, are people going to back this? Is this really how deeply they've fooled? And they didn't. People came out and lashed out against that. I've never heard one person even attempt to rationalize or say that made any sense at all. And so I think that they are crumbling. And so, maybe now is the best time ever for us to get this stuff out there and to be a cohesive unit. We're going to have different opinions on everything. Everyone is, but I think that we need to realize that we've got a bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to say about that, John, is long before I found Flat Earth a long time ago, I had come to the conclusion, after researching conspiracy theories and just seeing basically how screwed up the world was, how intimately involved the mainstream media was in this deception for everything. I mean, long before Flat Earth, like I said. And, I've said many times on the show, to me, if the mainstream says to do one thing, or if they say this is bad for you, then in my mind, that's a pretty good indication that it's probably something that is good for you, or it's something that you need to check out. Anything that the mainstream goes against, you once you realize, what they're up to, then usually you figure that quite the opposite is true. Then we have Donald Trump coming forward and, calling CNN fake news and, even so, they're even starting to fight among themselves and tear each other apart. And so this is why, the public opinion about the mainstream media is pretty much at an all-time low. So that's great. So the mainstream media comes out and says, well, flat Earth is just comprised of a bunch of idiots. And, enough people that have been looking into this, and even the people that don't look into it, they realize how completely corny the mainstream media is. And that's going to kind of put a thought in their mind, I would think, like mine, of, well, if the mainstream media is saying that flat Earth is completely corny, then it must be something that we should probably look into.
Right. Yeah. And there certainly is that cross section of people who most of them are probably already flat earthers. But so no, I definitely get your point. I would just say, real quick, it was mentioned earlier, the term Illuminati, and I think that Freemasonry gets, sloshed around a lot with that. If I was to define Illuminati, of course, there's the old Bavarian thing from the 1400s or whatever, but, the term gets thrown around a lot, and it is in the common vernacular. And if I was to define it, I would say that it is the central hub where all of the pyramids of power sort of intersect in the middle, like the center of a piece of pie. So whether these pyramids of power are finance or religion or politics or education or NASA, I mean, all of these different, anything where there's money, power, or influence are all run like, basically they use the Freemasonic model where it's a pyramid of power, but at the very center of that pie you have basically a revolving door of people who are common and know one another, and that's what I would call the Illuminati. And so whether that's the right definition or not, I think that's sort of a commonly accepted sort of definition of it. And so not necessarily saying Freemasons, which are a part of it. I think Freemasonry is a part of it, whether IPS cares to admit it or not. I think Freemasonry is a part of it, but I don't think that it's as massive a part of it as it is said to be. Now, of course, all of the presidents, starting with George Washington, were allegedly Freemasons, so it does go back pretty deep. But again, there were 8 presidents prior to George Washington who were I believe not Freemasons under the Articles of Confederation and the Continental Congress. So just sort of wanted to give my definition of Illuminati, and again, before maybe I guess we've been on a while now, but I had a few things I wanted to say and some questions. But if I see a potential Trojan horse, and this is no offense to you, IPS, or anything, but if I see a potential Trojan horse being inserted into the flat Earth movement, or at least in the mainstream narrative, in the quote-unquote flat Earth movement, then I'm sorry, but I have to dissent. I have to stand up and say something, and at least say, hey, wait a minute, there's about 10 red flags here that we need to look at. And regardless of how well presented a person is on certain forums, you said it yourself, IPS, what really counts are their true intentions, which nobody can really know, but we can sort of judge based on the fruits of their labor, and by the words that they say out of their own mouth when not, they don't really think people are listening. And so I think as truthers, especially flat Earth truthers, that we don't need to worry about what we've said. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, but as long as we're honest all the time, we don't have to remember what we've said, because we can just be honest all the time. And if our views change on something, then it's, we make our corrections and move on with it. But the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of online social media speculation and drama and rumor mills, all sorts of stuff going on in response to a certain video which I made and was released. Basically, it was a video response that was originally aired on the Globe Earth Troll extraordinaire, Timeo. And the sole topic of that video was obviously GCHQ, J-trig subversion, and cognitive infiltration of the Flat Earth Awakening, which may be happening right before our eyes in the social media world, and it would be no surprise if that's the case. Now, while the topic is being talked about, in terms of flat Earth around dinner tables, probably all over the world, there is no centralized hub for flat earthers. There is no flatearth.com. Of course, you have the Flat Earth Society, which is obviously controlled opposition. So there again, you have a perfect example of why agents would be talking about flat Earth, Jaron, is so that they can control the conversation and make people think it's ridiculous. But then you also have other inclusive online forums with similar names that present themselves as a scientific community, but will literally make entire threads about people's private life that has nothing to do with science whatsoever. However, there is no such thing as Flat Earth Inc. It doesn't exist. There's no physical office or headquarters for Flat Earth. And, I think that this is great because as a grassroots movement, it should not be federalized. It should be confederate because the truth belongs to everyone equally. And I do want to quickly apologize in regard to the Flat Earth Illuminati video that I published a couple weeks ago. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not apologizing in a sense of any form of retraction or backpedaling from my opinions, allegations, or dissection of that conversation that was highlighted in the video, as I indeed stand by each and every one of my claims, convictions, evidences, and circumstantial supporting facts on the context of the video to which I was responding to at the time that the video was made, on my end. Now, it did take me 2 days to render and upload because it was so large, but so, for example, it's been mentioned that I was falsely claiming that the second rocket launch will be launching a, quote, steam rocket from the weather balloon, which will attempt to reach the Kármán line, which, that idea is folly. However, that was the exact context and verbiage that was used in the video which I was responding to. So the only reason that I apologize for the video is in terms of the presentation, as I actually made the video when I was extremely upset, actually, and so therefore the presentation, I believe, suffered as a result. Because, as they say, never drive a car while you're angry, and I think that the same sort of thing applies to making videos. And just to explain, I had watched that original video involving the Globe Earth troll, Timio and all their buddies, along with IPS there. I had watched it 3 times before I started making my dissertation or dissection of the video or my response. So I was like, my blood was boiling, and I had already seen enough of the conversation multiple times to be completely incensed, and I think rightfully so, by, to me, the obvious league between Globe Earth trolls and our guest here, or at least in my opinion. Now, if you've watched the entire video to the end, the root of my anger becomes clear. Now, in retrospect, I believe that I should have presented the second half of the video first, then progressed the beginning of the conversation, but this would have been out of sequence. However, it would have impressed upon the viewer the reasons why I was so incensed prior to showing my absolute, seemingly preemptive disgust for the conversation, which was posted on Timio's channel, where IPS, sort of fits in snug as a bug in a rug. No offense, but it's true. Now, while there is a ton of really poor misinformation, as we've discussed, about the quite simple and obvious flat Earth truth, there's also a lot of misinformation and astroturf, if you will, sort of false grass movements going on. There's also like astroturf glober movements who exist solely to muddy the waters of this scientific discussion at hand that most of us here have been involved in for at least the last couple of years. And, finally, there's also a great deal of really quite amazing and logical information available about the topic of flat Earth online. However, it can be extremely difficult to find, especially in 2017, when social media is absolutely flooded with flat earth truthers, globe earth trolls, and then of course charlatans of all sorts who are operating by the J-Trig playbook. Now, whether or not they are actually working with GCHQ is irrelevant. There are thousands of content creators, probably millions, Facebook memers, bloggers, vloggers, scientists, engineers, pilots, etc., all sorts of people all over the place, considering the flat Earth reality and coming to the startling, sort of jaw-dropping, obvious conclusion that we were all sold a false bill of goods from toddler all the way to graduate or postgraduate in terms of theoretical astrophysics being settled science, when it is indeed the definition of pseudoscience, running the gambit of theoretical astrophysics all the way to theoretical nuclear physics and everything in between, as far as I'm concerned. Now, this is not to throw away all of natural practical science, but rather to differentiate between true natural science and theoretical hyperbole, which is indeed the opposite of science, categorically, hands down. There's no debate or question about it. Not only is theoretical astrophysics non-demonstrable, non-testable, non-repeatable, non-falsifiable, but it is also inherently flawed to the degree that so many contradictions exist within the doctrines of the religion of scientism or heliocentrism. It's absolutely staggering to me that modern, humankind has been deceived to this level for such a long time about something that is so obvious as the shape and nature of the world. Now, of course, we know the methods involved, which are convincing toddlers of all generations that the spherical Earth hypothesis is settled science, and essentially squashing any arguments that we toddlers might have had prior to our ability to rationally argue theoretical physics on par with our parents or our teachers. And so by the time the deceived toddlers become parents and teachers, for the last 500 years ostensibly, it seems that hardly anyone has revisited the topic of the spinning, orbiting spherical Earth skeptically and rationally and with an open mind to alternatives right up until the last few years or so, with very few exceptions. Now, I know for a fact, dealing with thousands of globe earthers, who have become avid, staunch flat earthers over the last few years, the realization of flat Earth is something so extremely personal, almost embarrassing, as it's difficult to come to terms with the fact that all of our preconceived notions about the world and space and even our creator have been built upon a totally faulty foundation of deception and philosophical preference, for example, like the Copernican principle. When dealing strictly with the flat Earth truth phenomenon, there are truly only three types of people in the world. First, the most common are the people who have never heard of flat Earth. Second, the less common than that are than the first group are people who have, in some manner or another, been introduced to the concept of flat Earth as a rational adult. There are, of course, subcategories within this second group, but then the final third group, would be the sort of the pink unicorns, or the smallest group of them all, and that would be we flat earthers who know for 100% certain that the Earth is a static plane, unequivocally, without any sort of question, based on the never-ending world full of repeatable proof that the world lacks all curvature or motion.
So, John,
Now,
are you getting to a question for someone or IPS? Because I'm kind of losing what this has to do with this conversation.
Well, I guess I'm getting to a point, but I know we're sort of running out of time. So let me just get straight to the question, because I wanted it to be in context, but okay. So first of all, my first question for IPS, unless you had any comments or questions about what I was just sort of rambling on about.
No, I mean, the only thing
I had a brief comment, but go ahead, Jared.
No, I was just going to say the one thing I do agree with you on is the whole idea of Freemasonry. You're not going to convince me that Freemasons are good people. There might be some good people, but there might be some good Satanists, and there might be some good dirtballs out there. I don't know. To me, it just seems like Freemasons need to realize that it's not a fair game when you've got the entire UK police force are Freemasons. You cannot have secret societies in a society where we need to depend on each other for truth and for accuracy and for, being open. And when you got the entire police department, that's, and I saw it happen with the Hampstead case, that, these children were taken from their parents. They were basically given to their raping father so that they could, and the reason it was done is because these cops all have to have each other's back. And we should realize that. I mean, if you get pulled over and improperly searched by a cop and they go to court and they've got another cop with them, that cop's going to back them up way before they ever back you up. And that's not right in this society. And it also happens in the courtroom, right? Every lawyer, every judge, all these people, they're in a different club than you. And that's not fair because we're electing them. We're putting them in these places. We're paying their salary. The cops don't get paid magically. They get paid from you and I. And so I totally agree with you there, John, that while there might be some good Freemasons, it doesn't mean that the organization itself should exist at all. I mean, all astronauts are Freemasons, for God's sakes. So, this group obviously is okay with telling massive amounts of lies to massive people, for some reason not really giving an F about it. Now, saying that, I went to a Jesuit high school. It doesn't make me a Jesuit. It doesn't mean that I haven't, changed my life about, not that they're teaching anybody terrible things in high school anyway, at a Jesuit high school, but they were purposely trying to get me into a department, either science or religion. They want you forced in there. But I think people can change. So when I hear somebody like IPS talking about not liking the Masons and not liking them for the reason that they try and keep people outside of the lodge in the dark and inside of the lodge in the light, when I see that, when I see ODD stand up and say, yeah, I made some fucking mistakes in my life. I did some things that I really regret now. I'm a better person. I'm working towards being the best person I can be. Well, that's who I am. I could look at myself 10 years ago and say I was a dirtball. And we all turn over new leaves. And so that's just something I just wanted to get out there, that I think that people, that's life. Life is making mistakes and learning from them. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's going to go through life and not make any mistakes. And so, do I think that all Masons are bad? No, I'm sure there's some good ones. But I have no problem with being suspect of the organization as a whole, because as a whole, they are responsible for being in some of the highest places. I mean, all basketball referees and all baseball umpires seem to be in these little groups and factions, these Freemasonic lodges. And then you find out that a lot of games that you watched, thinking they were real, were fixed. And so, I mean, all these things seem to lead back to the idea of secret societies, where as long as this group of 5 men get together and fool you, then you end up on the shit end of the stick. And I think that when you have secret societies like that, that's what's going to happen. So I totally agree with you there. But go ahead, IPS, you had a comment, and then John can ask a question.
Yeah, actually what you're talking about, which is, that's what I experienced. I saw this as a mechanism by which you could institutionalize corruption. And that's why I'm not in it anymore. As far as where I place them, I agree with you, John, that it's not the tip of the thing. Like I describe this thing as a hydra. You have Jesuits, you have Masons, you have the mainstream religions, you have heliocentrism, you have the cult of scientism, all of them leading to the same body. But that's just one head of it, and corruption is rampant systemically. You did make a really excellent point, though. I took a note here about Ron Paul. You said they paid no attention to Ron Paul, and they gave Trump a lot of attention. Now, Trump's attention was negative. They called him a deplorable. They called him everything you could possibly call him. And it had the opposite effect. And that's kind of my take on the mainstream media. It's like, hey, if they're not ignoring us, like, I would rather have thumbs down than no thumbs at all. And so, that was a really solid point there. And that's kind of my approach here as far as any sort of attention towards this thing. Even if it's negative, we can at least spin that. What we don't want is to be completely invisible. Now, we certainly don't need big government solutions. We don't need political saviors. We don't need a big government solution to what is a problem of bloated government. And kind of on about your video, the one where you called Tim and I Illuminati shills, I understood that. I took that as a little bit of tongue in cheek, calling us crypto protagonist Illuminati shill. I took it as tongue in cheek. My only problem with it is that it didn't fit the context of your other videos, because I was just promoting the heck out of your previous one, where you covered a very controversial topic having to do with elite gender inversion. But the video you did about my presence, I thought, yeah, that wasn't coming from a place of the strict objectivity I would generally have expected from you. But, you know, I understand where you came from and that you're on the lookout for a Trojan horse or a Trojan penguin, whatever it may be. And so I don't see any reason to apologize for it. I see where you're coming from. I was just like making sure, like, I mean, I understand it's emotions. Like you said, you don't drive a car when you're mad or something. So,
Well, no, I mean, really, I just wished I would have not done the video in sequence. I wish I would have started with the second half and then maybe progressed to the first half, because, you know, my emotions were high in the beginning without much supporting evidence. But, you know, and I understand what you're saying, you know, but I know we're running out of time, so let me get to a few questions. How are Timio and all the other Globe Earth J-Trig shills doing?
well, you know, I almost stopped making videos back in March because of Tim, because he was such a bastard.
Mhm.
And, you know, I don't like to say somebody's a troll because I disagree with them, but, you know, some people are deliberately provocative and obnoxious, and he would be one of those. And so I made a deliberate effort to email him, to talk to him. I ignored him for a long time, but I was like, all right, fine. If he's not going to go away, you know, I think you got to keep your, you know, your friends close, your opposition closer. And so I made an effort to reach out and say, okay, fine. We can at least agree to disagree, but we can talk as human beings. We don't need to snipe each other. We can get past the slander. And he's not even totally past all of that, as you've noticed. But I decided I'd make an effort to reach out to people who badmouth me, especially, you know, like even, what's his name? I can't remember his name. Vindication Boy. Okay, Vindication Boy's been around for like 3 years or something. And he said some things that I don't agree with. But he even offered to take down his video about me, where he called me a chick. And I'm like, don't take it down, man. If that's your point of view, leave it there. That reflects who you are. But I invited him on my show next week because I think that it's better to diffuse these things now and get past the drama and build bridges where we can, instead of having all these competing factions. Like we got that crazy guy, Event Skeptic. I think his name's Ronnie, and his cross-eyed boyfriend. These people are psychotic. And so I'm hoping that we can just get past that and maybe elevate the discourse.
Right. And by the way, not all these questions are coming from me. A few people had sent me some questions that they wanted to ask. So, this one that it's coming from me. Do you guys use, like, for example, during that conversation, do you guys use TeamSpeak or some other form of secondary communication when hanging out, like with Tim Osmond and them?
Oh yeah, for that conversation, we were deliberately throwing around terms like J-Trig and cognitive infiltration. I was throwing those terms out there, referencing Cass Sunstein, because I've heard Tim using it, and I was just kind of seeing where he was on it. But no, these guys are not part of any sort of organized group. Although they understand it, but they do function, they do act just like it. So I consider them to be, insofar as they act like J-Trigs or cognitive infiltrators, I treat them as such. I basically say, hey, you are acting like a flying monkey for the New World Order. You're an Agent Smith, whether you're getting paid or not. But if I sounded chummy with them on the phone, it's because
Well,
I
no,
was just
the reason I asked that, like, TeamSpeak could be like a second-party communication system outside of the Hangout. The reason I asked that is, and maybe this is just me being paranoid or observative, whatever, observational. There was about a 5-second period where you muted yourself on the Google Hangout, and then then you unmuted yourself, and everybody started busting out laughing. So to me, that was clear evidence that you guys were either on like TeamSpeak or like on the phone separately. But whatever, it's insignificant. What is your real name?
Well, there's a couple of reasons I don't disclose that. Mainly it's because, as you know, this topic is very controversial, and I don't want to subject people I care about to this. Like my best friends, my family, they're not even close to this. They're totally CNN, Fox, and I'm not going to be the one to deliver that paradigm shock. I'll let them wake up with everybody else.
Interesting.
Now you can call me Jack, which is my name. I mean, Tim Osmond. I took that name to be a thorn in the side of the other Tim Osman, who says that when Flat Earth gets killed, he wants to be on top so he can go on Oprah or whatever. And I'm like, all right, man, do your best. You're just going to sell more copies of my book, Flat Earth Activist, which is published under the name Tim Osman.
Right. I mean, I guess that sort of goes against what you said about the other two times that I know of that you've used Flat Earth proponents' names, where you've claimed that was to drive
Different context.
traffic. Right.
Yeah,
but
different context.
You've claimed that was to drive traffic towards their platform, where it seems that writing under the the nom de plume of Tim Osman would be counterintuitive in that regard. But okay, so different context. Another question, I don't know if you're aware of this, but are you aware of it's a fairly well-known connection between the initials IPS and a specifically, basically Freemasonic invasion of the Arabian Gulf?
No, I wasn't aware. I was aware that backwards is spelled spy, or that it could also stand for Infinite Profiteer Society. I've heard it all. I've even heard that I'm a female-to-male transgender, and I think you even put that in your video about me, which doesn't hurt my feelings.
No,
I think it's funny.
I didn't put it in the video. It was sort of suggested, but
No, there was a picture. There was a picture of my Flat Earth sign when I was on Earth Day, and instead of saying Earth is flat, it said FTM, and I thought it was a funny little jab. I have a thick skin. I'm unflappable. It doesn't bother me. I just thought it was funny. I thought it was funny.
That's cool, man. And honestly, the way that people react to those sort of allegations tells a lot, because if someone were to question my manhood, I would be like, that's ridiculous, and I'd forget about it. And so when people get super hyper defensive about it, to me, that just says something, because if you don't have anything to hide, there's no reason to be defensive. So, I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
No, I put it in there just sort of as a, it was a jab, but
it was clever,
this is a big thing. I mean, it seems to be that 90% of Hollywood is transgendered, and so, it wouldn't be surprised to see, no offense, but witchy Freemasons doing that sort of thing, because that's who's doing it. But
But what happened is I took the crypto protagonist Illuminati shill, I made it into a T-shirt, and I made $65 in profit in the first 2 days. So I'm like, man, thank John for dinner and movies that night, because it's like
you're
he
welcome.
totally hooked me up. I appreciate that. That was a good catchphrase.
Yeah. And John, don't forget, Cammy's a man and I'm a woman, really. So you got to keep things in context, right?
Wow.
Let me just mention, I have
seriously, this is where this goes. It's so ridiculous.
and I have
Go ahead, Jern.
I have human-skinned journals on sale, 50% off right now too. And free blood.
Oh, yeah.
Get 2 vials of free blood if you order now.
That's right. Yeah, Jared sells blood.
Yep.
I mean, this is the kind of crap, literally, that people will hang on to, and then idiots like BB will go on and press the issue just to create drama, to get clicks or whatever.
Wait, sell blood? What?
No. Well,
Oh, yeah,
no. I mean, people have been saying that because Jaron sold something on his website that was actually ink, but it was a blood red color or something like that, Jaron?
Well, it's called bat's blood. I mean, in the old days,
Bat's
they used to use bat's blood to sign things. They thought it was some magical power, but you can't sell blood now. You can't sell an animal's blood in a little jar in a little store online. It's just not.
Oh, so it's like a color. Okay,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Well, these guys are just
people
are jokes anyway. And for people who don't really get why, or I don't get why, if we're not doing anything to any other groups. If people want to research their square map, they want to research the simulation nonsense, then they can do that, and we don't bother them. We don't go on and on about how they're Satanists, they're deceiving people. Go ahead, explore all the different options for Earth that you want. That's kind of what we want from everybody. It's when these people get into these crazy moods that that there's definitely clouds behind the sun, and they just go off on a tangent about it when you can watch any Dwayne Kellum video, and one's right down on the screen. I'll actually press play. Watch the thing get above the clouds. There, the sun is way above the clouds, so whatever you think you're seeing, you're not. It's just the way it works. And so I just feel like there's people that that are welcome to, just like John, when you were on Lori and Lawrence's show. We weren't making any comments about them on Globebusters. We've never gone out of the way to say, hey, this group is talking about...
Not at all.
Not at all. It's just not something we're into. We want to talk about our thing. That's the only reason Bob and I started the show, was, hey, let's bounce some shit off each other and see if people care, if they want to listen. That was it. That's all we've ever wanted to do. We've never tried to downgrade what somebody else is doing because we don't know. You know what? If Lori and Lawrence are going on and they find the proof or some sort of evidence that there is a Pac-Manning son, then that's fantastic. Then that's great. But to try and stop other people from, especially when they're calling him satanic, because really, if you think about the word Satan, what does Satan mean? It means deceiver, right? It means adversary,
yeah.
right? So it's the one, that's trying to, who's being the adversary here? Who's being the deceiver? If we're just talking, and people are just all coming at us, calling us Satanists. That's not how Satanists work. We don't, we're not the adversary here. We're just a couple people talking. And yeah, do I still like the azimuthal equidistant map? I do, because there's things that I can make work on it that others just can't see. They can't figure out. They don't understand. They don't get how the sky slants away from you to the ground till it hits the horizon. There's a lot of things about it that work.
And we don't know what the sun is doing. I mean, I've seen a lot of people picking apart the AE projection and saying the sun can't do this and the sun can't do that. But honestly, we have no idea what the sun is or what it can do.
No, you know what? Take that. I have a video that I was just doing the other day. I have a big bright light here in the corner. I take my little glass dome piece that I have, little magnifying glass, point it right at it, and then move it to the left, and you'll watch in that dome piece, the light will move completely off to the side. And then you realize that the light could be right in front of me, 90 degrees east, but I can make it look, by just looking off in a different direction, that it's completely on a different side of the room. And so we don't know what the sky does. The sky probably works exactly like that, as a gigantic lens, and it's rendering for each person very differently than it is for another. That's why the globe earthers can't triangulate it. That's why we can't triangulate it. And really, we need to think about, is the sun even real? And what I mean by that is, if that reflection that's coming to your feet at the beach is rendered for each person along the beach all the way through, and you can see it, it's right there, it's real to you, but to every other person on the beach, they don't see it.
Right, but it's only one stripe. I know, right, it's only one stripe. That means it must be subjective.
Right, so I mean, that's what tells you that the sun itself may not be real. The sun itself may be a reflection itself, rendering differently for every person. So it's just, I just saw somebody did a super chat that asked, why don't we talk about the simulation theory? And we have talked about the simulation theory. Bob's a big fan of it. I personally am not. I don't think that there's a need to jump to it's a simulation. It doesn't make sense to me, especially when I hear Christians saying it. Doesn't make sense to me. That I'm sure there's a lot about Christianity that makes some sense. Not that it's a simulation. You don't have. I'm not impressed by a God that inserts himself in his own sim game, dies for the sins of everybody in the game, then leaves and says, now worship me. That's not impressive. Then the Majimoto guy who made Mario Brothers, that'd be real cool if he went into the Mario Brothers game, saved the princess, and then told everybody, now everybody worship me for all time because I'm the hero, I'm the savior. That's ridiculous. That's not a worshipable character. So the whole idea of a simulation theory to me is nonsense. This is real life. What we see here is, I think, we're spiritual beings on a physical plane. This is real life. There's consequences for our actions. But what was I getting at? The thing about this whole conversation between you guys that I think is interesting is, John, do you think that have you ever been in a group where you might act differently in front of those people? I mean, I put myself in his position, and I've had a couple conversations with Tim and the other guy, Hackett, I forgot what his name is, and I have to put myself in a little different mindset. And I just feel like when I was listening to that video that you wanted me to listen to the end of it, it just seemed like that's what he was doing to me. I mean, I thought that he actually said, when he says Mussolini-style fascism, that he's saying that as a joke. That they were saying, and then it just seems like to me he's kind of playing to that crowd. And
well, if it's a joke, it's not very funny because it's very close to true.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's really close to true, but I mean, it makes sense what he's doing. I mean, I don't know. For me, it just seems like there's nothing that he said there. I mean, even the 47, is that, let me ask you that, IPS, is that your number one book, The 48 Ways to Power?
48 Laws of Power, yes. And I specifically like that book for a number of reasons, but the very intro to that book says, people get triggered when they hear the word power. Now, if you replace the word power with self-governance, the 48 Laws of Self-Governance, that's what it's really about. But people hear the word power and they think it means domination and control. No, it's the complete opposite. True power means you don't have to push people around. And the book's about self-governance.
Well, the synopsis of the book, and I haven't read the whole thing, obviously, really appears to be putting on different faces in order to manipulate people to lots of different ends.
That would be the surface level interpretation of it. But if you actually read Robert Greene, his book Mastery, he's really a philanthropist, and he uses object lessons from history to describe various lessons, like the art of war. In the art of war, the book's not about killing people. It says the greatest generals win without ever having to draw their swords, and you win in the mind, you win in the info war, and that's why I study these books.
Well,
And the
I mean,
Mussolini
I'm
thing,
not gonna pick apart your choices of books, other than in terms of somebody that's in the truth movement, calling that their most influential book is a bit of a red flag, because it seems the overarching theme of that book, as well as Mussolini-style fascism, is overall mind control of societies, complete with psychological manipulation, as well as things like the black shirts and domestic terrorist organizations. And it's just that sort of thing is poisonous and antithetical to the truth movement itself.
know
So
thy
that,
enemy. I would say know thy
Well,
enemy.
yeah.
And second,
So-
they called me a communist, and so to make a joke, I said, no, I'm going for Mussolini-style fascism. It was a joke, but obviously
Yeah.
I'm an anti-statist. I couldn't be further from fascist. The globe is a fascist construct built on fascism, economic interventionism by centralized authority. It's all about mind control in the schools. So no, I'm the complete opposite of a fascist. I did that as a joke just to trigger them, to pull the rug out from under them. But I believe that
Yeah.
you have to know thy enemy. You have to read their playbooks. I read Saul Alinsky, Rule for Radicals. I read Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, like I said. You have to know the enemy. You have to read Cass Sunstein. If you don't know the enemy, you lose half the battles, and that's what it says in The Art of War. It says you lose half if you don't know both sides. You have to know not only your own plan, strategy, but your enemies, their plan, their strategy, and what they plan to do.
The only difference is,
Yeah.
though, there about that IPS is that when I read The Prince by Machiavelli, I absolutely hate it. So it's just funny because I would never consider it my top book. I read it because I do think you need to know your enemy. I did read a lot of Aleister Crowley because I wanted to know that mindset. It's just weird because actually when I asked you that right now, I thought that was also a joke, because that book doesn't seem like something that I would call personally my favorite. But again, I don't.
Well-
But that's fine. I mean, people can have their own books that they believe in. Just like I said, people can go and study whatever they want to study. That I certainly would never have a problem with. But what I think, what I was saying that I kind of lost my thought earlier, is that I feel like we can all allow others to exist unless somebody's clearly doing something, and John may have a different opinion of what I do of you, because I don't see anything that I can say is clearly this is being led down the wrong path. I see somebody saying the earth is flat. I see a bunch of people that have wrenches and like to hang out and like to spend late nights watching you paint. I mean, who am I to say that I have a problem with that? I can't say that I do. Until I see something blatant, and what John, I know what you found to be blatant, I didn't, and I think because I spent 6 hours talking to him. So when he was making some points throughout that conversation that you took on a one conversation thing, it's just like if you only listened to one of my videos and it happened to be a video where I was just trashing religion, that you would have a very different opinion of me. And I think if you took that video and made a response video to it and pointed out certain things and made almost conjecture like accusations about that conversation, I think that it would be fair to say that you were a little bit presumptive on that assessment of me. That yes, I don't have the same religious views maybe possibly as you or other people, but I think really if we're all kind of going in the same direction and we all agree that we're trying to make the place better and that we're tired of the way that it's been run for hundreds of years, that's where I just see the difference. And I have no problem with calling a spade when it's there, when it's right in front of your face. And in this case, I still don't see it. I don't see it, and I could be wrong. I'll say about everything.
Perhaps we're coming from different point of views, and this feels sort of weird because I'm talking about you IPS in the third person, but not really. I've been studying the tactics of governmental sociological manipulation, for years. And to me, when I see
give me an example
red
then.
flags, it becomes obvious to me.
Give me an example then, because if you've been studying it for years, give me an example of what he could be up to that would be government planned to come into a place where he's starting to speak out about flat Earth. He's making tons of tweets every day. He's got websites about it. So now what can happen from this point? Because this is where I lose contact. I say, no, they don't want people speaking about this. They don't want getting people with wrenches marching around with, fepes. And so I want to know what you think could happen.
And wait, let me add to that also, John, really quick. And this goes out to not only you, John, but to everybody in the community. We seem to use the word shill, like it's absolutely commonplace. He's a shill. The thing is what is it exactly that constitutes the shill? Yes, we know the textbook definition, but if you were to, let's say you were hired to be a shill, anybody, and I'm speaking to the community in general. If you were hired to be a shill and you took on this job, how exactly would you proceed with that role? What would you do to derail the flat Earth? And that's the thing that I think really needs to be answered in order to be able to identify these specific people. Now, I have my opinion on that, and I've already stated that. But I want to know what everybody else thinks. If they were actually in this job, if they were performing this role, how would you go about it? So I agree with you, Jaron. So go ahead and answer the question, John.
Okay, so if I was a shill, it's really hard to put myself in that position because sort of by, the common definition, that means to intentionally deceive people. And I just don't think I could bring myself to do that. But if I was a shill, and I was trying to get people away from flat Earth, I would pose as a staunch flat Earth supporter. I would get a lot of talk going in the media, and then I would kill an effigy of flat Earth and go to being a globe Earth believer, a flat Earth denier, and a global warming believer. That's the sort of thing that I would do. And that's exactly the sort of thing that
like a
is,
Tiger Dan?
foreshadowed. Yeah, sort of pulling a Tiger Dan. I think that is a very effective way to bring people away from flat Earth. And, the larger the platform, the more effective. And it's not so much going to affect flat earthers, but it's going to affect the public's view of flat earthers, because if you see, say, a big name, brand name flat earther going back to the globe, well, if you're a everyday Joe that's never heard of flat Earth, then that's going to turn you off of flat Earth and say, gosh, even their leaders can't believe in their own theory, right? That theory gets thrown around a lot. Now, the other question had to do with, some examples of how this sort of thing has been implemented. I can give you a recent example is with 9/11.
I was asking, what could he do? Because I know how they've used it in the past. What I don't understand is how we're applying this to flat Earth. Because it's like you just said. You were talking about, you couldn't lie to people, but you're then describing him telling the truth to people. He's sitting there saying every night that the Earth is flat, that the Earth is not a ball, that we've all been lied to. So everything that he's saying is true. So it hasn't got to the point yet of him turning and then telling everybody it's a globe. So I'm
perhaps not yet. I haven't watched every minute of his stuff, but I saw quite enough on that Tim Osmond interview. I mean, frankly, to me, the way that a person acts behind closed doors, or even, somewhat publicly, but it was obvious that we've got Freemasons talking shop in the open, so it's sort of behind closed doors. But okay, so perhaps it hasn't gotten to that point yet, and perhaps I'm totally paranoid and nothing will happen. But I could see something like potentially, and I think it was laid out pretty clearly in the video, that you get a bunch of flat earthers to endorse a rocket launch that ultimately ends in catastrophe, and that would be used as a mainstream media meme in order to really put a major dent in the progress of the flat earth awakening, not to flat earthers, but again to the people in the public who are not affected by this, because first impressions are everything. And if 80% of the world gets a repetitive first impression of a hypothetical flat earth rocket crash, then that's going to turn people off from flat earth. It's going to make flat earthers seem ridiculous.
I think that's
but John, let me ask you something though, really quick. I mean, so when Tiger Den pulled his little stunt, all right, the way he did it basically was, first of all, he came out firing at Jaron, about Antarctica. He made a really poor argument, and ultimately, yes, so he walked away from flat earth. Now, if you ask a lot of the newbies today, or a lot of people today, who even Tiger Dan was, most of them, I'm sure, couldn't even tell you. So yeah, I watched him walk away. I watched him blow up. I watched him self-destruct. But do I think that what he did would have had any effect whatsoever on any potential newcomer or potential flat earther? Absolutely not. I don't think that at all. And so, in fact, like I said, the only thing that I see that really can damage the flat earth are the active flat earthers. People like Event Skeptic and Awake Souls, for example. I mean, these guys are complete idiots, and anybody coming in and looking at what they're doing, if they can't see, what a couple of nut jobs these guys are, then, that's a problem. And this is what I see that can damage the flat earth. The one person in the world I would hate to send anybody to that was coming into flat earth would be either one of those two guys, right? But as far as Tiger Dan, yeah, he converted, but I would still send anybody to Tiger Dan's initial videos and all the stuff that he did long before he converted, because he had so much good stuff that was so accurate that, I mean, it really would, you have to trust then in the individual's innate ability to be able to discern,
Right.
what is the truth, just from his material. Whereas if you go and you sent them to Event Skeptic or Awake Souls, they would go, these guys are complete freaking idiots. And they would be so turned off to flat earth immediately that, again, these are the kind of guys that are a problem, right? And I'm not just saying just them. There's plenty of others that are,
Well,
promoting drama and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I don't watch Event Skeptic or Awake Souls.
Neither do I.
I did some hangouts with him, but in terms of Tiger Dan, I watched some of his stuff, and to me, he never really came out with any great proofs, but he seemed like a likable guy, and he was extremely biblical. And see, like, okay, I'm a Christian, but I absolutely do not approach flat Earth from anything from but a zetetic sort of scientific perspective, and like my faith, and I'm not even a Christian in the hierarchical religious sense. I'm a Christian in terms of I'm a follower of Christ and his teachings, but I would refer, because I would get a lot of emails from people like, well, what about this Bible verse and what about that Bible verse? I would simply refer them to Tiger Dan. And so I think that, yes, by Tiger Dan pulling the original official Tiger Dan, that yes, I think that he may have turned away potential Christians looking at flat Earth because he jumped ship. And to me, that has a huge psychological impact on people who are looking at a topic for the first time. Sure, you're going to have people who are going to look past that. Sure, you don't have people who know about him today, but I still think it has an impact. And he did have a pretty big platform. And again, the bigger the platform, the bigger the ripple effect. But the mainstream media has such a huge effect. I mean, yes, we can debate on its credibility and how much people watch it and how much people take it to account. But the fact is that they have a method. They have a propaganda machine that relies on repetition and a clear, concise message that over, a few months or maybe a year, people will believe what is repeated on the mainstream media, even if they don't agree with it. And I think you can see lots of cases in point, even in the last 10 years. And I don't even have to list them, I don't think.
So if they have that plan, if that's their goal, then they're going to do it no matter what. I mean, stopping IPS from his potential killing of the Mad Mike in a rocket crash, if we stop that, it doesn't do anything, because
I don't want to stop that. I just don't. I want my name to be separate from it. I don't want to be part of that. And I think that flat earthers in general should have the choice as to whether or not they want flat Earth's good name put on that rocket or the second rocket. I mean, and
well,
again,
you just
I'm
said
not
earlier
trying to
that
play
nobody
judge. I'm
owns
not
it.
trying to stop anybody. I'm just saying let's be a little bit more careful on what we endorse.
Well, I agree, but when you say we endorse, and then earlier you said that there's nobody who owns flat Earth, nobody owns the term research flat Earth. If somebody wants to attach that to a rocket and attach that to a strip club, it doesn't matter to me. That's not my. I can't say what they can and can't do with that word.
They could attach it to a bomb in the middle of Times Square too.
And how am I going to stop that?
Does that do it any good?
But what good does it do for me to stop it? If that was their goal, then they're just going to do another bomb.
If you saw it coming and you didn't try to stop it, then you'd be guilty by association.
It depends on what you're talking about. If I saw it actually coming, here it comes down. But no, just to have maybe some thoughts that it could possibly happen. Yeah, maybe I would make the point of saying, hey, just so everybody knows, I don't associate with that because I think this is what's going to happen. And that's what you did. I just think that we have to keep it open for more people to fall into this however they do. And I think anytime we shut doors, it creates more problems. I always look at everything like what good can come of it. What good can come of each situation that I do? And if there's nothing good that can come of it, then I cancel that out. And so, when I look at people that are trying to interject into other people's progress or other people's ideas or other people's channels, I always say, what good can come of that? I don't think there's any good. If what you're saying, the reason for you doing it was those reasons, then I think that you would have to think, well, if I stop this, they'll just do it again. And isn't it better that we keep talking about the true things around the flat earth, keep pointing out the things, trying to get people's minds to wake up, rather than to constantly go around and play defense and protect everyone from, don't you say, no, don't go to him because he might do it, but he might do this and that guy might do that. To me, it's just like, no, let's just let everybody scream the truth. Now, when somebody comes out and starts saying that there's a rover on Mars, hey, maybe it's time to speak up and say, this guy's deceiving you. It's bullshit. But if people want to talk about, simulation theory, if they want to talk about flat maps and Pac-Man maps, that's fine, because I think people have discernment. I think there's a reason why they get 300 views a show over there, and it's not because Google, is blocking them, or that Google's siphoning their gas, or whatever everybody else says. That I think
I'd rather watch paint dry. I think maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, me too.
in fact, yeah, I think that's all that's watching those 300 views anyway. It's just the walls. I think somebody in their house is just pressing play. But,
and you're right. I mean, and granted, I mean, I put this caveat in the video. I don't care if people call me paranoid. And I never said that I don't like IPS, and I never said that I don't like people who are his friends. What I said is I see some red flags here, and yes, I was angry when I made the video, and I think it was rightfully so, based on some of the connotations towards the end, which I think I should have put in the beginning. But at the same time, if I see, and again, I'm sort of intuitive, and I've been studying this stuff for a while. If I see some red flags that amount to a flat Earth, pressure cooker bomb going off in Times Square, let's use that as an analogy, then I'm going to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we ought not put a flat earth sticker on this. I'm not trying to stop it. I mean, it isn't the same thing as a pressure cooker bomb, whatever, but it could be similar.
Right.
And, my goal in that video was not to stop the rocket launch. I had nothing against the rocket launch. I had nothing against the billboards at all. But my goal in that video was, if there is some sort of malfeasance afoot, was to simply change the trajectory of events by voicing my dissent, because whether or not IPS is a practicing Mason or an ex-Mason, and whether or not he can freely admit that, I don't know. But what I do know in my research is that Freemasons, there seems to be a rule that they have to sort of announce publicly what their plans are going to be. And so I saw that whole conversation as a huge red flag. Honestly, I've never seen Timmy O get along with a flat earther as well as I have seen this one. And so that's another red flag. But one of the main points that I thought was interesting, and this is in my list of questions, is that, let me just paraphrase here, but IPS, you're obviously no dummy. You're a smart person. You're probably one of the most well-spoken, well-read people that I've encountered in a long time. And so I just find it either very irresponsible of you or possibly deceptive of you to endorse and convince flat earthers to endorse a rocket launch where you hadn't even read a simple 4-page PDF about the thing, at least at the time of Father's Day, when you had already decided to endorse it. And so, I mean, to me, that's just, it doesn't match your intelligence. There's a disconnect there.
Yeah, well, with regards to that forum, and I heard you talking about it, it's not publicly available. It's proprietary information, and they will release it on their time. It's not my launch. The guy was already going to do the stunt regardless. He just offered us the sponsorship, which I accepted happily, because we're sponsoring the stunt in the desert. The second thing is a whole different issue, but what all of this really underscores to me is the importance that Flat Earth remains a leaderless resistance. There's no one spokesperson. One person can't bring this thing down. One person can't represent it for the media for all time. And I think it's a little more indestructible than that. I think it's past that point. So I'm not really too worried about it. I mean, I understand your concern about a potential PR flop, but really to me, the biggest enemy we have is small-minded drama that you see, people taking like in the chat rooms, just attacking content creators, making it almost a risk just to speak your mind. Like, we should be having these talks with people we disagree with more often. I think it's far more productive than what we normally see. So, yeah, I'm not really too worried about it. I understand where you're coming from, and I just say, don't believe me, don't trust me. Just watch the results and understand that if something goes awry, it really isn't going to reflect on anyone except for those directly involved. And
Well,
you have called it in
I
advance,
think
so
it
you can
will.
say, I told you so,
Well, and I don't want to. I don't want to. I want to say, well, guess what? I was crazy. That's what I'd rather say is I would rather see this thing go off without a hitch. Honestly, I'd love to see him break his record, but I mean, I see him do like maybe a quarter mile or whatever, and the guy got hurt pretty bad. So, I mean, I just think him trying to get up, what is it, a mile on the first one? I think that's extremely dangerous, and I don't know, publicity stunts can go awry. I mean, they really can go awry, and I just.
But what does that have to do with the flat Earth? I mean, wouldn't the going narrative be that like NASA shot him down, or that they put something into the rocket that made it not work? I mean, to me, I just think I'm in the same boat as IPS. I'm not worried. I don't worry about that stuff. I don't think there's anything that they can do. I can't picture anything. It doesn't matter what they do. If they say that flat earthers are now they're terrorists and that they've already tried that, right? With the boat left in Canada and all these people that are just painting on walls. I don't agree with that method because you're right. I don't want to have to hear that and then people say, "Oh, this is the kind of people you hang with, Jaron. These guys that go out and burn lawns so they can tell about flat Earth." No, I'm not associating with them. But on the other hand, how each person gets this out is their own business, and we've all been lied to for our entire effing lives, and that sucks. So some people need an outlet. Maybe they need to go burn lawns. I don't know. I don't need to do that. But I just think that I'm not worried about it, and I think that's the only thing. And again, we can all agree to disagree here. I think it's important that we all talk it out. I just want to get across that I still don't understand what could go so wrong, and what we're trying to protect people from. If people follow IPS down the road, and 6 months, a year from now, there are all these penguins with their wrenches going along, and then he turns on them and says it's a globe. If those people at that point say, "Oh, he's right, it's a globe," and they all go with him, then that's so be it. Then those people have not watched any of my videos, because there's nothing that can come up like that he's just going to be able to say that is going to turn anybody, because there's too much evidence here. There's too much wrong with everything we've been given. There's no proof at all that anything in space travel is real, none whatsoever. The orbits are real, it all. I mean, so to me, it's just there's too much evidence, and I feel like we have so much more to do with pushing what's right about flat Earth than to point out what's wrong, because we know there's a ton wrong. We know that the map's not right. We know that things don't work. We know that there's questions about the eclipse. We know that. But if we go around pointing fingers, say this guy says the eclipse is this, and this guy says that that it's a circling sun, and this guy says it's a straight sun, and I think it's Yahushai, and whatever everybody's saying, that's getting us nowhere. It's just like a circle.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. I just think, one other point, and I don't know how much time we can have. I can go till, till 11 Eastern or whatever. But one point that I wanted to make that was in the video is that it's very difficult for me and others. I'm not the only one, okay? But it's very difficult for people to follow the narrative that this stunt man was a flat earther for years. The rocket launch was already going to go off. Then he conveniently saw a billboard that you happened to, to be involved in putting up. Then he decided to raise $8,000 from flat earthers. And I understand that you have an answer for this, but it's an extremely, to me, it seems like a contrived narrative, and it's fairly obvious.
It's a fortuitous coincidence. I think it's providence. I think it's total luck. The guy's only a flat earther for a year. And the only reason he saw it was that somebody called it fake.
You had said 2 years on that.
It might have been.
So
it might have been me who said 2
he
years.
corrected me.
Oh,
he corrected me. He said.
Okay.
He said it was only
whatever.
1 year.
And John, have you heard? John, are you familiar with Evel Knievel? And do you remember him trying to jump the Grand Canyon?
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Okay,
I think it's a little before my time, but yeah, I've seen.
Yeah, I know. I'm the old guy here, but so yeah, and basically that stunt was a complete failure. But you know what? The reason you even know about it now is because it's because he did it. And yes, it failed, absolutely. But it's the whole idea of the effort, whether it was successful or it failed. It was such a publicity, blitzkrieg, that it's stuck in people's minds forever. And still people to this day know about it. And that's kind of the way I see this Mad Mike thing. it may go off without a hitch, and he may set his record, and everything may be great, or it may go down and be just a spectacular ball of flames. Either way, in fact, honestly, if he failed, it may even be more,
I don't know. The media has a way to put a spin on things to where it really does influence the public, either way.
But we're not in control of that, and that's the whole thing. But, whatever way that they put in it, the facts will still remain. Either he did it or he didn't. And, that's going to be one of the most memorable things about it. So, that's all I'm saying. Even if it was a huge failure, it's still going to be, in fact, like I said, it may be even more noteworthy or newsworthy if he does fail, because people love it when people die. What's that song? Dirty Laundry,
maybe not. But I don't know. I just don't feel like it's necessarily a great introduction into the mainstream to have a deadly flat Earth rocket crash, potentially, hypothetically.
But he's doing it.
I understand.
But he's doing it. You're not getting in the rocket. I mean, I'm not getting in the rocket because I don't trust it at all. I would never do it. But this guy's getting in the rocket.
I'm not getting in the rocket either.
Honestly, I think he's nuts. But hey,
he is nuts.
There are people like that.
He is nuts. He flat out admits that he had a 30% chance of living, or 30% chance of dying on the first time he did it. So if you increase the distance,
sure it wasn't 33.
It might have been 33. He's got that MM, right? Nobody named their kids MM initials for all time. Please don't. I'm kidding. No, I just think that this guy, he's a flat earther, and I don't own flat Earth any more than he does. So if he wants to see if there's a curve. Now, I don't put any backing in it because I don't know that it can even be done. So I understand where you're coming from, but nobody ever donated a penny to that rocket launch. There's not a penny not the one that's coming up in August. That one people donated to. But again, you don't have to donate. People don't have to donate. That's the thing. I mean, I don't go and donate to things that I don't agree with. But I do donate. I gave $5 to Mike for his launch, and the thing that's coming up for Antarctica and the one that's going to the North Pole. Those ones I'll give $5 to because that's something that I agree with what they're doing. So I just feel like we don't need to protect others from.
I'm not even opposed to donating. I want to be able to read the 4-page PDF and the logistics of the thing before endorsing it. That was one of my main points, is that it seemed awfully either irresponsible or maybe just excited. Like you said, it was a coincidence, but it just seems rather convenient. Now,
but those are two different events. You understand that, right? I keep thinking you're referring to two different events. That the one that you're talking about that IPS said in that conversation when he was asked about it, he says, I don't know. I don't know yet. I don't know. I'll let you know when the 4-page comes out. That's the rocket launch to go to space.
But it had already been endorsed, right?
What does endorsed mean?
Like, okay, flat earthers are backing it. That had already been decided at that point before any logistics came out.
No, not backing it. I mean, you've got a stunt guy who went on IPS's show and said, I also want to go up to the Kármán line, and I've got this idea for this rocket balloon where I go up, and then IPS said, great, that's fantastic. That'll be awesome to see. We can't wait to see the results. If you call that supporting it, and, I guess when I heard that, I was like, yeah, go get him, flat earther. Go up to 62 miles. So I guess you can call that endorsing it. Nobody put any money towards it. Nobody said this is the end-all, be-all of everything that will ever be. But the one that's coming up in August, that's the one where he's trying to break his own record. So I just feel like sometimes you keep getting those mixed. Like they're two different events, and maybe that's why for me, like I said, I think that you watched one video, and if somebody watched one video of mine and made a video about me, I would have a hard time saying, did you do any research? Did you look at other things? And I know I'm not saying you just only watched that video. I understand you've watched other IPS videos. But I just think that
was the topic of the response. It was a single video in the context of that video for the response.
Okay, and I'm just, that was my whole thing, is that I'd talk to Mike, and I can just tell that he's a legit crazy stunt guy, and so if that crazy stunt guy wants to do something for his flat Earth belief, I wish him the best of luck. I really hope that it doesn't go the way I might envision it for, if you launch somebody in a balloon from 120,000. I've seen where Dwayne Kellam's balloons end up. I can't imagine launching a rocket from there. But, I can laugh all I want, but it's still not me doing it. So I don't know. I give more power to everybody. I don't want to stop anybody from doing anything they want to do.
Well,
Go ahead.
the second one is to me seems even more preposterous, whether it's a steam rocket or some other delivery mechanism. Just because once you get up to over 100,000 feet, I honestly don't believe that the barometric pressure is going to be there to not only guide the rocket, in terms of the the back pressure of the barometric pressure on the nose
we're not
to keep it
sponsoring
stable.
the second one. We're not
Well,
sponsoring.
I know.
That has nothing to do with that, John.
I'm not saying that. I'm talking about, in terms of the second one. Okay, in terms of the first one, there's a 30% chance, whatever the chance is, he's going to die. And I just think that we should be a little bit more careful about, as flat earthers, endorsing something like that. And, I'm not saying don't endorse it. I'm certainly not. One question, and again, some of these are questions from the community. This is for IPS. Do you practice, or have you practiced, or do you at least subscribe to the philosophy which is generally coined Crowleyism in terms of things like sacrificing small children for ritual purposes?
No, and I don't even know if he did that, and I don't even know if he's a real person.
Well, I mean, there's books that are allegedly written by him where, the whole thing where it's like one of the quotes is the best ritual sacrifice is an intelligent young blonde.
Yeah, that was an old Victorian joke about masturbation.
Wow. Okay.
When he said he was sacrificing 300 kids a year, that was talking about how many times he was, So that's what that was. It was an old joke. I mean, he had a lot of perverse jokes that he would do just to thumb his nose at authority. He wasn't literally murdering kids. That was just to scare the hysterical church ladies of the day.
So you've looked into that pretty well then, huh?
Yeah, I read Magic in Theory and Practice, and I read the subtext, and I read the interpretation of it and his own tongue-in-cheek jokes. He made a lot of jokes like that. And I'm not a fan of Crowley. I do like the idea of Thelema as a libertarian philosophy, but the guy was more of a communist, leftist, progressive type, and that's not really where I'm at.
Right. Okay. Just a question. And I'm just sort of rapid firing through these because I know, we're running out of time. We got other stuff to talk about too. Have you ever run your own coven of witches or multiple covens?
Coven?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say covens, but I mean, I used to gather around with me when I first got interested in witchcraft, people who were also interested, to learn from them, because people have their different views. The most I ever learned, I think, was from someone, I was still in the military, he was from Haiti, who taught me quite a bit about the theory and practice of what you would call, voodoo, which isn't really what they call it, but just the idea behind it. And it's not black magic, it's not white magic. They see it as just how they practice spirituality, and it's a little more grounded, a little more earthly. It's a little more about what you can do by getting the, quote, gods on your side. But there's nothing nefarious about it.
Yeah, I think all that sort of stuff has a lot to do with faith. Like, as long as you have faith in the rituals, then certain things can happen. Another question for you, and if it's too personal, let me know, but did you grow up in a traditional sort of Christian home, or like a Wiccan home, or a Freemasonic family, or just an atheist home, or like what was your upbringing?
Strictly Catholic. Although my grandfather was, I guess you could say, tutored by Jesuits. His father was a Jesuit. So there was a lot of, it was more Catholic leaning. And when I joined the Masons, they were pretty pissed at me because most of the male relatives in my family are Knights of Columbus. And they saw some sort of contention. But that's not what I experienced. The Masonic Lodge I belonged to had a number of Knights of Columbus. People went back and forth. But as far as my upbringing, it was strict Catholic. I wasn't even allowed to read the types of books that I was reading with regards to witchcraft, the occult, and that kind of thing, which made me want to look even more closely at it. Because I'm the type of person, if you say, don't look behind that curtain, I'm going to yank that curtain down and see what's there.
Wow. And, and I don't know if you ever made this connection, but I've personally made this connection, and a lot of others have made the connection between Roman Catholicism, paganism, and even Freemasonry, and even certain types of like Knights Templar and secret societies and such. I mean, did you ever make that connection that Roman Catholicism is really sort of just another hub of one of these, it's not Freemasonry obviously, but it's yet another one of these sort of pyramidal power structures with their own little citadel and stuff, right?
Yeah, I think you could even make the case that, if anything, Freemasonry is probably something that's perhaps even more like I would say like if you put chicken, if you put which one came first, I would say that Freemasonry has more in common with, or maybe emerged from Jesuit or from that side of things. I don't think it emerged in a vacuum, and I kind of think all roads lead to Rome. And I do think
Yeah.
that it is pagan to its core. It's a polytheistic religion disguised as monotheism. And one of the reasons I started making videos is I recognized that NASA's rocket launches are nothing more than the fertility rites of Babylon mystery religion, that the rockets are indeed obelisks, which is why they have the sun god symbolism, the names. The satellites take the function of the angels. The original sin has been replaced by the carbon footprint. So I recognize that this religion that we call Catholicism, which means universal, the one world religion, has always been polytheistic. It has always been just pagan Babylon repackaged, and it's been repackaged once again as heliocentrism and scientism.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, you make a lot of great points, and I've listened to your stuff before, and I agree with you on a lot of levels. And my hopes and prayers and my goal is to see flat Earth eventually become commonplace, accepted. Just a self-evident fact, which it is. And I really think it is that obvious that one day, even within our lifetimes, we can achieve that. And I just hope and pray that your efforts really are in line with that goal. And I really hope, and I'm not sure whether they are or not, but I hope they are. Now, when you say things like you're out of flat Earth, I think you said in July or August, but you're just basically going back to ghostwriting. You like being by yourself and that sort of thing. So so you're just going to no longer spread the truth about flat Earth after, what was it, July or August?
Yeah, I was taking a lot of heat, a lot of hits, dealing with a lot of the stuff that all of you've dealt with. And I was just thinking, how much more of this do I want to take? But, the more things move forward, the more I realize, I don't really care. I realize that there's nothing you can say in 200 characters. There's no combinations of words, letters, emojis that's going to change my trajectory. So I decided that, no, actually, there's really no reason to stop until this thing is, because the thing is, truth is self-evident. If we just keep attacking the illusions, we keep really attacking the credibility of NASA, the ISS, the rocket launches, past and present, I think we will unveil the truth. And so, no, I'm committed to it till the very end. And even afterwards, I'll continue to be offering commentary after the fact. So, no, I'm not going to go away, much to the chagrin of certain people out there. I'm
glad to hear that. I mean, I'd rather see you, make strides towards keeping flat Earth going, because, I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I thought when you had gotten that billboard put up, it was great. I did think it was a little odd that as soon as Jake arrived at your house, you got a call from the news, and then you claimed to be someone else who happens to paint circles in the dirt and is apparently a compulsive liar who never worked for NASA. But whatever. There's just certain things that make me question your integrity. And so hopefully, I always look at new flat earthers as completely neutral, if not give them the extreme benefit of the doubt. And I'm always one to promote flat earthers and do hangouts and stuff with flat earthers and do everything I can to, just to talk about this stuff openly like adults. And, my just biggest fear is that we're going to see agents within, things like GCHQ and JTRIG infiltrating this movement in order to steer the conversation off the rails. And so if that is not your goal, then I apologize for my video. However, I'm going to leave it up because I think that it's got some important points. I mean, the things that you say on public forums 99% of the time is one thing, and I think you make a lot of good points, and you're obviously no dummy. But then when you see certain contexts 1% of the time where, it's something completely different than what you're normally, used to hearing from yourself and other genuine flat earthers, it's just yet another red flag. And so in that regard, I support what you're doing. I support your rocket morally. I support, not your rocket, but, your endorsement or your whatever it is, sponsorship of the rocket. I'm not against it. I don't want to stop you from doing that. And I think your billboard idea is great, and I'm glad that you got that done. At the same time, I just really hope and pray that your intentions are true and that you do stick with this to the end. And hopefully you will be one of the people remembered in history that helped to kill the globe once and for all. I mean, honestly, I think the globe's been dead for at least a couple years. I don't even see there being a debate anymore. And so when I hear people that are, self-proclaimed flat earthers going on public venues and claiming that, yeah, we think the earth's flat, but we can't really prove it, and it's not really that important. To me, that is psychological preparation for a psyop that is essentially going to be the construction of a straw man effigy of flat earth that is ultimately slaughtered in the mainstream. That, again, it's not going to affect any flat earthers, but it may put 50% of the general population back 10 years in terms of even possibly looking at flat earth. And I know, Jaron, you disagree with me on that, but really, I mean,
well, like I said, I'm not worried.
First impressions are
I'm just not worried about it because I don't think I can stop it. And to me, it's like, yeah, I could go around and really be careful with every single new content creator and really, play with them with kid gloves, or I can react when the first one we find out did a shill behavior. To me, I feel.
And I've been backstabbed so many times. I've just grown a little bit more wary. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I have too. But it's just, I feel like you have to move forward, because the more you let people hold you back, the more people will see that, and the more that they will know that that's the way to get to you. So, I mean, that's something I like the way IPS is unflappable. That's how I want to be. I could spend time making video responses to, people who call me a coward from behind a computer. And, to that person, if they want to go ahead, and they know where I'll be November 9th and 10th. So you can show up there and you can say that to my face, and then I'll knock you back to Lawrence and Lori's show. But it just is something that I think that, and I understand your apprehensions about IPS. I understand them. But I think that, what you said was cool. That I think that we can all get along and we can move forward. And I think we need some sort of a common force. Like, I don't know, it's like you said, it's a leaderless movement. It has to be. It's grassroots. But I think that the more we're all looking forward and not to our sides, and I've said it a million times, that word shill has done more damage to this movement than any shill or group of them could have ever done, because it's caused everyone to look at everyone. There's people who still call you a shill. There's people who call me a shill. I think there's a video going on right now that's live streaming this. It's called Shill Fest Friday Night or something.
I was just going to say something about that, but go ahead, Jaron.
Yeah, well, it's just ridiculous, because if somebody can't see the 2.5 years that I've put in, or the 2.5 years that you've put in, John, or the night after night that IPS has put in, or the work that Bob's done, if somebody sees that and can't see, genuineness, then to me, I struggle. I don't get it. But I do see some issues, because I saw the same thing with IPS. That's why I went and called him and said, will you come on Raw for 3 hours? And that's why I went on his show for 3 hours, because I needed to get some answers. And what I got out of that was that he's different than me. We have some different ways of doing things, but we both have the same exact goals. And I felt like he was a flat earther. I feel like he's a flat earther. So could he be a disinfo agent? Sure, anybody could be. You could be, right? I mean, so anybody really could be. But I just think we just need to... you said hope and pray, that you hope. Well, I hope and pray everyone that's in this is doing it for the right reasons, and I hope and pray everybody has the right intentions. I don't think that's the case. I think it would be impossible. But that's my hope. My hope is that people see that in each of us. That we, somebody else made a video today saying we're doing this. I made the video so early because I wanted to build the drama behind it. And, John knows the truth of that. We decided this, today. We got together, everybody. Texting, figured out a time, and then it was like John said, yeah, if you do it right now, then I can post it on Facebook. And I said, okay. I mean, there's nothing nefarious about anything that we do. So when we see this stuff, it's just really goofy. It's people who don't see the whole picture, that it doesn't matter what we do as little people. What I'm trying to do is just focus everybody in the right direction, because I think that John's right. This can happen in our lifetime. This is not something that we need to look way down the road and say, oh, this is going to be hard. That we know we can prove these things. We know that, and John, I don't know, did you hear that interview yet or Dave Weiss and I did with the NASA guy and the SpaceX guy. I don't
No,
know.
you never sent me a link. Is it on your channel?
No, I don't think
I'll
it's.
send you a link, John.
Okay.
I've got it. It's actually on Globebusters. It's just private.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you were supposed to send me a
Oh,
link,
sorry.
and I
Well,
never
it's not
saw
public
it.
yet, and so it's not public yet, so it'll be out public soon.
Oh.
But
Oh,
Great.
well, when it comes public, well, if you want to send me a private link, I'd like to watch it. Sure. Yeah.
the one.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, the one
It's
thing
already
that was
uploaded
cool.
on our channel.
Oh, cool. The one thing that was kind of interesting about that made me think about what you just said is you were saying how, okay, well, if somebody says that they don't believe it, they know the Earth is flat. Well, neither Dave or I said that when we were questioned by these NASA and SpaceX guys, because I don't think that's the right approach to a SpaceX and a NASA guy. I think our approach was much better, and I think that I put different proofs. I don't just come out and say the Earth is flat, there's no curve. If you listen to the interview, I think I played them well by going the route of the no spin, the whole idea of relativity, saying that I grew up and I heard these things about science, that they run the scientific method, and then I found out that they make a lot of their decisions based on philosophical ideas. And I think so I would hate to have somebody like you watch that video and say, well, this is Jaron flip-flopping. He says in one venue that he believes the Earth is flat, but over here he's not even really saying that. He's saying things about relativity. Because I didn't say the Earth
Well,
is...
no, and I see what you're saying. There's a big differentiation. I mean, if you're speaking with a so-called expert in the field, then you sort of have to speak their lingo. I mean, I did the same thing when I debated that's Dr. Josh Grinley. I mean, yeah, you sort of have to start talking about gravity and relativity and
Gotcha,
the
okay.
Apollo astronauts. And so, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying.
Okay.
I mean, but it's a little bit of a different context. But yes, I see what you're saying.
And you're right, it is a different context. When I hear that, I'm like, I think of you looking at me the same way, like, in that situation. But I do understand it's a different context. But I also think when you listen to videos I did with Red's Rhetoric, I didn't play you just open yourself up for being destroyed. You would rather try and get them on a different level. So I think sometimes we do have to play a different role. Now, you don't have to act like a Freemason or things like that. But I mean, I'm just saying, I think that doesn't necessarily mean, you got to listen to what everybody, something everybody says. Like you said, you listen to him. I've listened to him. That's it. That's all you can do. And you make your decisions based on that. So did you have any other questions? Oh,
I
Well,
have something I want to chime in
go
real
ahead.
quick.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. So, we talk about, people being possibly disingenuous, and you had concerns about IPS actually talking to Tim Osmond, as did I. I mean, we all know about what Tim Osmond's about and all that. And I have to tell you that here's the thing about Tim Osmond. And you guys are going to find this actually unbelievable. But after I met Tim at the Flat Earth Asshole meetup, and he comes across as very sincere, very genuine, very nice guy, the whole 9 yards. In other words, like a complete psychopath. Okay, these are the kind of people that can look right at your face. They can convince you of anything. They can lie right to your face. I mean, Tim told me straight up. He goes, no. He goes, I really am here. I want to help you guys. We need to all get along. We need to, do all this stuff. And I said, well, Tim, what you've been doing is completely unacceptable. You can't go sniping people's hangouts. You can't be calling people all of these names all the time and expect anybody to want to cooperate with you. So he says, well, I'm not going to do that anymore, Bob. I'm past that. Right. And he had me so utterly convinced. I have to tell you that I seriously considered thinking that, just like IPS said, well, maybe we should have Tim on and maybe let him have his piece if he really wants to have this civilized type of discussion and stop all this sniping and name calling and all this stuff. And that lasted for about 3 days, I think, right? And after that, he comes back on. He's sniping Dell's Hangouts. Right now, he's running a simulcast of this, and calling all of his shills, a shill fest, just like you said, Jaron. And it's like, this guy is never going to change. He is a complete psychopath that will tell you one thing right to your face, which is a damn lie, and then, go on and do whatever the hell he wants to do. These are the kind of guys that need to be just blatantly ignored. And I hope, IPS will see this at some point, and I'll turn that over to IPS here in a second for that. But this is the lesson that I learned. I mean, I was seriously considering, letting him come on and have his say on Globebusters. And then I saw that, he, just like he said a million times before, I'm out of this, I'm quitting Flat Earth. I'm done with it. This is crazy. Of course, then, the next day he's back doing his same old stuff every time. He really had me convinced as well. And I think that's what IPS was after. Tim can come across as sincere, but like I said, most psychopaths can, when they're lying right to your face. So I don't blame IPS for at least wanting to engage him. But, as I said right now, he's running a simulcast, calling all four of us shills, all 9 yards, making fun of us. Same old Tim Osmond, doesn't change. He's just still a liar and still full of BS. And I personally will never have anything to do with him again. And that's the way it's going to be. So
yeah, I'll go on the record and say the same thing, because I've also talked to him, and when you talk to him on a one-on-one level, he gets to your level and says, "Oh yeah, all these conspiracy, you're right about this and that." And then it even got to the point, Bob, like you said, that I considered having him on my show for a conversation. And then he does something like this, and you're absolutely right. There's no reason why I would even consider it.
Worthless.
Did you guys see the hangout that I did with Tim Osmond and like 2 or 3 of his buddies, including the Upside Down Head guy? Yeah,
Yes.
I was treated like complete, absolute garbage, and I would never hang out with them again until they apologize sincerely.
But I would be
wouldn't
careful of
mind
that.
talking to
Well, he'll
people.
do that.
He'll
but don't
do
believe
that.
it for a second.
Right, but I mean, I don't. I'd actually like to talk to people who are globe earthers, but globe earthers who have actually looked at flat Earth, because honestly, the reservations that globe earthers or so-called globe earthers have against flat Earth are frankly irrelevant. A couple examples would be the Southern Stars and the ISS. Now, I mean, and I know that, yes, if you're debating astrophysicists, you have to get into complex things, but the proof of flat Earth and stationary Earth are very quite simple, geometry and physics. I mean, it's really a no-brainer. It becomes very obvious once you've been sort of deprogrammed from the indoctrination. And so I would really like to, and I've actually been sort of in my personal life confronting globe Earth believers with this for the first time and making some progress, but we all know that this isn't something that you just snap into. It's literally a process that we have to individually decide to embark upon, and we have to be very careful and very discerning, because there's so much bad information out there, and misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything from things like phrases like the dome, which I'm sorry for dome believers, but things like the dome to me are tantamount to saying the edge that you will sail off of. I mean, to me, that's how ridiculous the idea of the dome is. And I think that, IPS and I agree on that. And so we definitely have common ground. IPS, if you're genuine, if you're really after the truth and really after getting this out there, then, there's a special place in my heart for you. Honestly, there's a special place in my heart for anybody who stands up for what they know to be right, in spite of all of the adverse consequences and everybody calling you stupid. I mean, I think that that's the right thing to do. I just still have my reservations, and I'm sorry, it's nothing against you personally, but I think that you have a big opportunity, and this is just for me personally. I'm just speaking for myself personally, but to earn our trust, and trust is earned. And I think that you haven't done anything terrible. I think that what you've done is good. I just I tend to react on my research, which has been pretty extensive for the last 10, 12 years or so, into all sorts of things. And when I see red flags, I just have to call them out in dissent. And like I said, I honestly, I hope that at least the first rocket launch goes off swimmingly. I hope the guy breaks his record. I hope Flat Earth makes all the headlines in a positive light. But until that happens, I'm just very concerned, especially because it seemed like you were ready to endorse the thing prior to really knowing the logistics. But other than that, you can call me crazy, you can call me paranoid, you can call me a penguin hater. I'm not any of those. I just really love Flat Earth. The Flat Earth truth is very important to me. And if I see even a minor threat to it, then I'm going to overreact. That's just me. And I'm sorry that I overreacted, and I am sorry that I put that video in the actual chronological order, because I think that if I would have put it in reverse chronological order, it would have made my anger seem a little bit more justified. But
well, as far as your trust goes, like, I spoke to Dell. I didn't know who he was, and he was pretty mad about this. And he accused me of being a shill. I had too many subs for the short amount of time I was there. And he said he didn't trust me, and I said, good. I wouldn't want you to trust me just right off the bat. Trust is something that you should earn. And I said that I would reach out to him again sometime in late July, knowing that by the end of July, I will have earned that trust, presumably. And so, yeah, I certainly don't expect, I mean, because it wouldn't be worth anything. If you just blindly trust, blind trust is what got us into this problem in the first place. So I certainly don't expect it. I would have, it has to be earned. You've earned my trust as far as your work goes, with the exception of the video where you were unobjective in certain points. The large body of your work is the reason I know who you are in the first place. But as far as the globe goes, I've been saying it's 2AG after globe. We're kicking a dead globe, even debating it. The debate's not even there. It's over. I'm with you on that, 100%. I mean, sometimes, on that discussion with Tim, maybe I was not conceding any points, but I was taking the perspective that I'm a ball agnostic just for the sake of argument. But Tim, unfortunately, turned out to be intellectually dishonest, and he's not actually a truth seeker. Someone who's interested in truth will debate you. They won't snipe your accounts. And I'd kind of hoped that him going out and meeting people in person would cause him to have a little more empathy, but it doesn't really seem to be the case. I mean, time will tell, but he's not really relevant, nor are any of the goblins. I don't call them trolls anymore. I call them goblins. And they're not relevant anymore anyway, so you can engage with them if you like for your entertainment.
Well,
but
they're not relative in the platforms that they're on, but okay, let's just humor this hypothesis that we're dealing with JTrig, and I'm not necessarily talking about you or Tim Osmond, just in general. They're going to have platforms that seem to be not watched much, but they're also, and I can pull up the documents, they're also going to do things like, for example, send out emails to people claiming to be the victims of whomever their target is. And so people could be doing that behind the scenes totally off YouTube. Another thing would be to ruin business relationships by either spreading false allegations about a business or ruining business relationships through slander, lying, whatever. And this is all protocol of JTrig, and all that stuff is done sub rosa. And to me, when you see people like Timio coming online and spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for at least a couple of years, never-ending trolling Flat Earth, but then claims that he has a bit of an interest in conspiracy theories. I mean, it just goes to show that this person is being disingenuous. And so sometimes we have to listen to what people say and then think about that and ask ourselves, does this make sense in the context of the way that this person is presenting themselves? And frankly, I've been dealing with Tim Osmond for years, and he's done nothing but provide confusion, circular argument, and really just muddying the waters of this whole conversation by trying to steer people away from Flat Earth in, not just in comments threads, but other places. And if such people, or if, let's just say hypothetically, if he is involved in actual JTrig operations, then the extent of his malfeasance we'll never know. And frankly,
he's not smart enough, John. He's
well,
not.
He portrays himself that way, but
yeah, he
honestly,
thinks he is.
people like IPS, and this is a compliment and sort of, it's not an insult, but it's a compliment in a way that I think that you IPS are smart enough. Because again, I can sense intelligence. I know that you're no dummy, and I just really hope that you have the the best intentions for the Flat Earth movement in your heart. That's all I can say. And in terms of the things that you've said tonight, they sound great, but I'm still not 100% convinced. But again, trust is earned, and I have nothing but love for you, brother. All you guys, all you Flat Earthers, and you Lobies, I really have nothing but love for you, because this is a scientific discussion. There is no room for friends or enemies in this, and we certainly do not. The last thing that we need is the mainstream media mucking up this conversation, and the last thing that we need are leaders being rolled out to debate Stephen Hawking and Neil deGrasse Tyson, only to throw out like Vsauce red herring arguments about flat Earth and that sort of thing, so that it is further discredited in the public eye. Because, Rowbotham wrote Zetetic in 1865. Yes, he was a Freemason, but I don't think he was trying to take over the world. He did a really great job with the tools of his time of proving that the Earth isn't a spinning globe. And the Zetetic movement, kept going in through the early 1900s, but eventually what happened is the mainstream media and the government, because they're all colluding, they got together sometime in the 30s and 40s, and they decided that they were going to do a huge psyop on the American people. And this included everything from, like I said, the LSD counterculture, to the space race, to the nuclear bomb hoax, and even, portions of the World War II narrative. All of this history, even the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, all of this history is just completely distorted. We don't know what history is in reality, and I just don't want to see Flat Earth go down in history as something that it is not, because Flat Earth really is a grassroots movement of very smart, intelligent, open-minded people who have realized this very simple and obvious truth, that all this garbage that we were sold as this, bona fide scientific bill of goods as toddlers turns out to be just absolute nonsense. And that's why it's so exciting, is because when has anyone else lived in this sort of era? And so I welcome flat earthers. I love flat earthers, but I'm almost like, and I'm not Jewish, but I'm almost like a Jewish grandmother when it comes to the flat earth movement, in a sense, not as a leader, but just if I see something that is affecting flat earth negatively, like, for example, Tiger Dan. I was the first one to make a video about that. There have been other people that are backstabbers and liars in the flat earth movement, obviously, and I've called them out about that. And I'm not trying to play drama, and I'm not trying to, stir up clickbait or whatever. I'm literally looking out for the flat earth movement, which I don't want to see sullied by, people who were lukewarm flat earthers to begin with.
And that's the only reason I wanted to have this conversation, because I feel the same way. That I'm not trying to be a leader. I'm just trying to, when I see two people that I think are going to be important going forward, two people that I feel comfortable with by my side, and if those two people have issues that I think can be ironed out, I just wanted to see if they could be, because I didn't think that it was some issues that couldn't be gotten over. But John, I think you were unfair to, you said that we don't know our history. We do know that Eratosthenes measured the globe with 2% accuracy in 275 BC with sticks and the sun, just so you know.
Yeah, with the very high technology of the ancient Greeks, which consisted of a hole in the ground and a stick in the ground,
and 500 miles distance, and a cell phone. So. Oh yeah. Did you have other questions for IPS?
I had a whole list of them, but honestly, I think that the conversation has gone pretty. I've gotten out pretty much everything that I wanted to get out, and And again, I don't want to offend you, IPS. I think that you're obviously a very smart guy, and I want to think that you are genuine. I really do, and I would just love to see your work and your audience grow. I just, one thing I disagree with you on is, Christians. And, yes, I understand that your typical average Christians can be very closed-minded and very judgmental, and I think that's antithetical to Christianity. But Christians are also very forgiving. And, I told the same thing to Eric Dubay years ago, because when I joined IFERS, one of the first things I noticed was a pinned comment on the IFERS board that essentially it was a big, long thing written by Eric that essentially meant no Bible thumping. That was the long and short of it. You'll be kicked. This is a scientific website. No Bible thumping. By the way, they have a whole thread dedicated to my mugshot when I was arrested for failure to appear for possession of another's driver's license. Yes, I had a fake ID since I was 16 so I could buy beer. Okay, shoot me. But so that's very scientific, right? But the point is, though, that I joined IFERS, and I told Eric, this thing that you have against Christians is really going to hurt you business-wise. I was speaking to him from sort of a marketing consultant standpoint, because that's what I've done for years, and I was really new to Flat Earth. I told him, I said, if you were to create, just say, call it a kiddie pool for Christians or religious or spiritual people to discuss flat Earth on your forum, your forum will grow exponentially. And actually, I don't know if it was because of my advice or not, but within a couple months of that, he actually sort of had a religious sort of subsection of his forum. And so, again, I have, as much as I disagree with Eric Dubay on a number of issues, I still have a special place in my heart for him because that dude's busting out some serious truth. Flat Earth, the nuclear bomb hoax, all sorts of stuff. I mean, he does great work, but at the same time, when you marry flat Earth to, say, loving Hitler and baking him birthday cakes, then that in the public eye is a very negative impact. And so, there's lots of examples like that. And so, I don't know. I like to keep my videos, except for the last few where I've strayed a little bit. I generally like to keep my videos scientific, simple, but at the same time, like you said, Jaron, when we're dealing with people who are totally indoctrinated with theoretical astrophysics, we have to speak that language. We have to know their model just as well, if not better than they do, to debunk it. I mean, there's just so many things besides curvature and motion. I mean, orbital mechanics. I mean, the full moon during the day. I saw one the other day just after I talked to Matrix Decode, who's pulling sort of a half Tiger Dan, by the way.
Yeah, I've seen that. And I've had on the screen for the last little while just so people can see. Still counting right now. As of right now, it's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. We're at about 20, almost 24 hours that they've had just this one image up for the ISS. They have not shown the Earth, and they've not shown the sun. It's just, you can go here, it'll be blue screen most of the time, and then this picture here, the rest of the time it'll get dark. It's completely a joke. $53 million a day, and they cannot take a photo of the Earth from the ISS. I mean, this is just, it's nonsense. I mean, there's no excuse for that. And any globe believer who can just make an excuse for that and just wipe it away with, oh, they're doing more important things. They're blowing water bubbles, whatever they're doing up there. There's no reason why the people who pay every one of their salaries and every one of you paid for all this equipment. Everything that you see, you paid for. They don't, that's where the money comes from. So it just pisses me off that we don't have people. We need to go to NASA and force them to do what they're supposed to do, which is be the civilian space agency. That's the thing that sucks about this more than anything, is that if I was in charge of NASA, we'd all know the truth tomorrow. That's how easy it could be. We're studying day in, day out. Every day we're trying to get this truth when they already know it, and they're just lying to us. It's just junk.
Well, the only way to do that, though, is to, and honestly, I know this sounds sort of Herculean, but we would have to first do away with the Federal Reserve, do away with the IRS, the CIA, and then replace the entire corrupt government. I mean, there may be 1% of Congress and Senate who are actually legitimate, people looking out for our best interests. Do away with the lobbying business, which has no place in a republic or a democracy. And then when the people have control of things and control of our own money supply, then we can start dictating what we do with our money. Oh, and of course, we're going to nix NASA, but think of what we could do in true exploration, true geodesic surveying of the far south and the far north,
right,
and exploration of the plane. I mean, we could do wonderful, wonderful things. And I think that right now we're really on a turning point, and it's really important to me to see this thing go in the right direction when I really see that it could go way the hell off the rails really quickly if we're just not careful. That's my main, and you can call it fear, but again, it's just me being cautious is what it is.
And I hear what you're saying about all those organizations that need to change, but really you can change it all with just one change, and that change is the media. That is the responsible agent for everything that's happened, because if we replace the media tomorrow with real people, then all of a sudden all this corruption would get reported. Every theft, every thing that the governments are doing, everything that NASA's doing, then it would start to come out. That was the intent of the media. The media is supposed to be that
Right.
independent agent.
But the media is owned by the government, who's paid
Right.
for by the Federal Reserve Bank. So it always leads back to the Fed. Always.
Yeah, I'm just saying we would need to replace them with like you and I and IPS and Bob. We become the media. Then again, then they're just going to come offering us money. And if it's not us who takes it, it'll be somebody behind us. And they go through the whole process
Yeah.
again. So you're right. It is a money issue too. IPS, appreciate you being on. Do you have any questions for any of us at all? Anything at all?
See, I think we've covered everything I was expecting to cover for the most part. I mean, there's just so many topics that we brought up tonight, specifically about the media. I guess the main thing though here is that this is a new thing. What's happening right now with HBO, CNN, Denver Post. I think also ODD and Critical Thinking Always are going to be talking to Denver News 9. It's going to be live streamed on Facebook, and we don't know what's going to happen, but none of us here are hoping to win over the media. We're just using their
Right.
platform. So, we're not trying to gain the approval. There's some people who are worried that we're trying to get their approval, which we're not. And and whenever I do talk about media, by the way, I always call it the government entertainment media complex, because I don't think we should separate Hollywood from the media or from government agendas.
Yeah, good point.
But
Just as many
Yeah,
green
no-
screen mistakes.
exactly. Well, thanks for having me on, and it's good to talk to all of you, Bob, John, Jared. Definitely always entertaining, and I think it's very important to be very transparent. If people are gonna call me a shill in the comments, I'll give them my phone number so they can call me, and surprisingly, very few of them ever take me up on it. But I'm an open book. I'm transparent, and so I will answer any question. So, because there are a number of channels that are making videos trying to impugn my character. It's like, just call me and ask me directly. And if they don't do you the service of calling and talking to you directly, then they're probably not interested in the truth anyway.
Yeah, and what I'll do, man, is I'll mirror this on my channel. I'll add it to a playlist, and I'll put a link to it in the video I did before. Because I mean, like I said, man, what you're saying is beautiful, and I would love to 100% believe you, and I even give you the benefit of the doubt. But again, my position. I'm being cautious, and if I've offended you at all by that video, I was angry when I made it. Am I less angry now? Yeah, a little bit. It's been a couple weeks, and so yeah, I don't let the sun set on my anger. I'm a very forgiving person, and just I really hope that that you do great and wonderful things for the Flat Earth Truth movement. I really do, and I think that I think you can be a big player in this, and I really just hope and again pray that your intentions are honorable and valiant and all that good stuff, and just I would say prove me wrong, man. And again, I've got nothing but love for you, because you're coming out saying the Earth's flat, at least on this venue. So hey, I can't disagree with you there, bro.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. And hey, one more thing. I was just at the airport, and I had some creepy guy with blue gloves palpating my thighs, and I'm like conscious now of the fact that the entire thing is security theater because of a boogeyman created by the media. And I'm with Jaron on this. I think the instant we turn our backs on the media, on the entertainment, and all of its government agendas, and their boogeymen disappear, their entire infrastructure disappears, because it's a big parasite. So what you're saying about the Federal Reserve makes 100% sense, because we have to go away from feeding the parasite into self-governance, and that's why I say Flat Earth is an anti-statist movement. So
Yeah, totally.
thanks for your time,
it is.
and I'll definitely be interested to follow your content into the future. All of you, Glowbusters as well as Morgile, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, definitely. I'm only doing Flat Earth videos from here on out unless something really jumps out at me. But yeah, man, good talking with you, and hopefully we can have constructive talks in the future. Definitely interesting conversation, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, thanks,
absolutely.
Jaron. I appreciate it, and thank you, Bob. Enjoy your vacation.
Absolutely, IPS. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks a
Appreciate
bunch.
it, brother.
Bob, you have any final words before we sign off?
Yeah, just a couple things. Obviously, as I said, we are in Maui, and while we are out here, we are planning on doing a Hawaii get-together, and at least a Maui get-together. If anybody wants to fly over from any of the other islands, that'd be great. But that will be up and coming, and I'll probably work with Mark Sargent and get him to put a video up, and then we can put it up on our channel as well, announcing where and when. But it's definitely going to be within the next 2 weeks because that's how long I will be here. So, or if you are interested in attending and you are in on Maui, just send me an email, bob@jeranism.com, and we'll make sure that you are absolutely on the invite list when we get everything put together.
Awesome.
I think that's it.
John, final words?
No, it was good talking with you guys. It's been a couple weeks. It was good chatting with you. And so, are we back on the docket for 3:00 Eastern this Sunday? It's already the 16th, isn't it?
Yeah,
Wow.
this Sunday. Right, Bob?
Yep. I still have to put the show together, but yeah, we're on.
Hey, by the way, Bob, if you swallow a balloon full of Maui Wowie, they won't catch you. No, I'm kidding. You live in Colorado. What am I talking about? You don't even care.
It's no big deal to me.
He gets better stuff out there.
I need to get out of the South, man. I'm telling you.
I wanted to say thank you to the people that did the super chats. So the Trivist and Phil Inda Blanc. Does that sound right? Michael Crahan and Freight Train and HS Drake. Somebody blocked him, so he donated because he got blocked and said nobody will be censoring me.
Oh wow, that's not cool. Wow.
Go find the others. Carly Sunshine, thank you so much. Platonic Forms, Morgan Ellis, Time Months, and Ryan Denmo. So everyone was really cool, and appreciate you guys watching. And all of this is done just to, I don't know. I have a vision that we can get this moving. I think that we're getting closer all the time now. Bob, how many days were you on the front page of the Post?
Well, just the one day. However, last I checked, well, actually, I don't think I checked today, but as of yesterday, we had still retained the #1 spot for the most popular story for the entire time, virtually since it came out, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Let's take over the world. No, I'm kidding.
Let's do it. It's better than the ones running it now, I'll tell you that much. So, and to answer the, I think that was it. That was basically all we were going to talk about. All right, so yeah, join us Sunday. We're going to, Bob's going to tell us about some of his experiments. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just to wrap up. In case you guys forgot, my channel is The Morgile. I've got some decent, fairly new flat Earth videos on there. So if you hadn't seen them, watch them. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, go subscribe, please. Thank you. That's it.
Yeah, his link's in the description. So is IPS. You can find Bob and I and John on Sundays at noon Pacific on the Globebusters channel. And I think that is it. And we got your experiments you're going to show us, Bob. And then he's got a story, talk to a pilot. So we'll talk about that. And I'll show some other things. And I also was supposed to do an experiment on Tuesday. We went out to the beach. When we got there, the weather was not cooperating. But I took a couple videos, both with the GoPro and with our camera, of a sunset. And what we can see is that the sun is setting way further behind than the water line. And so I got some good shots of that to show that who knows how far away that is. Could be 100 miles. Who knows? So we'll be showing that, and we won't be doing much else. I can't think of anything. You guys, anything? Last final words?
No, we're good.
All right, guys, be kind to each other. Don't lie, and open your mind. There's truth inside. Till next time. Peace.
Peace.
And so I do think that, for the most part, Freemasons have become a straw man, and it's kind of disconnected from the reality. And I've never heard of a Mason having their tongue cut out, their guts ripped out, burned in the brazier scattered to the four winds, or had someone tied with a rope around their neck and then nailed to a stake next to like the ocean tide where they get drowned. I mean, I've never seen any of the penal codes enforced. I mean, have you?
No, I can't say that I have. And I understand what you're saying about research too, because
What about
but
the rum guy? What is it? James
Captain
Morgan?
Captain
Yeah,
Morgan. That's like the
yeah,
one example, but to me,
yeah.
it's
But
no different
well,
than
there's
when
one.
like anti-Muslims will say, "Oh well, if you leave Islam, the punishment for apostate is death." And maybe you might have honor killings here and there. Maybe an apostate from some radical sect might be killed here or there, but it's certainly not the rule. And as far as the penal codes in Masonry, they do not enforce them. There are no throats being slashed for some guy joining what is essentially like a bowling club. I mean, it's like a bowling league. It's just a bunch of old retirees hanging out. They're not involved in that kind of activity as far as I've seen. And so I would say the burden of proof is on the person making the claim that it's a cult of assassins, backstabbing, murderous assassins, to prove that. I mean, the oaths are intended to be, I believe, more or less a psychological ploy, a bit of fear, a bit of groupthink, basically saying, hey, if you cross the group, you're screwed. But to me, it's groupthink, mind control. I don't believe there's any real substance to their oaths.
Well, and I agree with you to some degree that Freemasonry, at least in the past, has been demonized, because if you look at most people who were scientifically literate, and we're talking practical science, like even, for example, Dr. Samuel Rowbotham, who, if it weren't for him, we probably wouldn't have a flat Earth movement. Love or hate the AE projection, but honestly, like most of what was used to launch this thing in the modern era, and even in the early 1900s and stuff, was all based on his work. And apparently Dr. Rowbotham was a Freemason. And what this goes to show isn't that he was like trying to take over the world. What it goes to show is that people who were educated and who wanted a career in either architecture, engineering, science, that sort of thing, they became Freemasons. That was the way that it went. And we still have that to this day in terms of fraternities and colleges. I mean, it's a very common thing. And so, yes, I agree that Freemasonry has been demonized to a degree, but there's also another side of Freemasonry, which I'm sure that you obviously know, if you've made it to the 32nd degree as you've claimed, is that the Blue Lodge, or the neophytes, or the initiates, the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry at least, are given sort of a false understanding of the virtues of Freemasonry, yet are misled into believing that they have a firm understanding of these virtues, and it's later revealed to them, either sub rosa, or if they're clever enough to figure it out, but at some point it's revealed to them that their interpretations of the symbology and the rituals and even the virtues and dogmas of Freemasonry, they were 100% completely misled. And just sort of backing up, because that was one point that you made, and I do agree with you that Masons have been demonized. I mean, it started out as it seems like a practical thing where builders, we're talking in Europe and stuff, and feudal systems where builders, people who knew how to build, were able to travel across boundaries that were otherwise impenetrable by peasants, by the peasant class, and that would be enforced by like royal guard and stuff. And so Freemasons necessarily had free passage. That's why they're called Freemasonry. And they necessarily had, secret handshakes and secret meetings and secret coalitions with the powers that be, if you will, in order to make it possible for them to have free passage. And so Freemasonry was the perfect womb, or the perfect matrix, to ultimately be overtaken by psychopaths and royals. And it seems like that did happen at some point. I know Freemasons trace their origins back to Hiram Abiff, who allegedly, designed the Temple of Solomon, and who really knows about that? But they really do claim to trace their origins, at least allegorically, back very far. Now, let me back up.
Astronauts to the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 3, ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we have a problem.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
What you're seeing here is a mirage. Mirage. Mirage.
What's going on, everyone? It's jeranism, back with a live video for you tonight. Got a good show for you, I hope. Thanks to those in the chat for joining us. Thanks to those of you, I don't know, at home, in your car. Special shout out to those upside down for me, down in down under. And a shout out to the perpendiculars too. You know, Africa. And, oh, I know somebody else who's perpendicular right now. That would be Bob. Bob, are you back from the store? Bob's not here. Bob went shopping. Bob is living the good life over in Hawaii while we all struggle and through this toil. So he'll be back. He'll be here shortly. But he's perpendicular right now, so at least that's what he says. And with me tonight, I got two guys who haven't got off to a stellar start, but, you know, that's how some things go. We'll see what happens. But by the end, we will be further apart, or who knows exactly, maybe closer. We'll see. First, someone I've known for 2+ years. I've enjoyed his work. Enjoyed, for sure, hosting Flowbusters with him, which is, by the way, returning Sunday, 12 noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, and 9 in Hawaii. And that is John the Morgile. John, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, man? And you know, I hate to use the term stellar starred or even anything to do with that because it has so much, I don't know, negative connotations to a flat earther. But honestly, you know, I've spoken with IPS once. I think that was on the Glowbusters, and we had a pretty good conversation. I don't think it went awry in any sort of way. So I wouldn't say that we have gone off to you know, like off the rails right off the beginning, but yeah, you know, there's a few things that we probably need to hash out, and so I'm glad that we're able to do this sort of in an open forum, you know, as gentlemen, as adults, and not as you know, childish people sometimes do in internet land. So yeah, awesome stuff.
Good, that's the hope. And so with us also, we've got a guy I've known for just a few months. I did have him on Raw for 3 hours. I called into his show. Definitely making a splash around the plane. And, you know, he's either loved or hated, it seems like, and he is IPS from Infinite Plane Society, also known as Mark Sargent and Matt Boylan. What's going on?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jared. And yeah, I'm glad to be able to speak with Morgile. We actually spoke a couple of times. I think once was on Candy's show for a few hours, or it was about 20 minutes actually. But
Yes, that's right. Yes, you're right. Sorry about that. You're right.
we were talking about different psyops and what kind of claims we should make, which claims are irresponsible to make. But anyway, I thought it was a productive conversation, even though we didn't quite agree on everything. And lately, I've been making an effort to reach out to people who are basically setting themselves up as like opponents or something when we're all on the same side, as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm willing to really talk to anyone, even people who have said horrible things about me and those who have made weird insinuations or whatever. It's like we can clear it up with a phone call far faster than making videos that, you know, don't have that instant response.
Oh, you mean like calling people cowards from behind a computer screen? You coward.
Right.
It's like, is there any more cowardly thing to do than to call somebody out from behind a computer screen? It's like, yeah, that's the way you would go about it. So yeah, I do appreciate you guys both saying yes. It was my idea. and I'll just start with my opinion on the matter, and then we'll take it. You can take it or leave it, and we'll go from there. But as a flat earther, because I recognize that in front of me is a huge mountain that I have to climb the coming weeks, months, years, and so it's not going to be easy. And I've always known that John's going to be along for the ride. I've known that from real quickly into this whole thing, that the flat Earth can't go anywhere with people like John and me here. And he's a fighter, but I've always kept my eye open for other people. Always you got to look and hope that more people come along. You'd think that's going to happen. As we keep talking about it, you think more people are going to be becoming channel owners or video makers, and they are. They're coming up all the time. And so when I first heard about IPS, I checked him out, thought he was interesting, thought he was a little bit different, but listened one night, and I could hear it in his voice, to me, that he was a flat earther. I could tell that, and I started to understand how he runs his chat and why he has his rules. And so because I like to look into people, I had him on my show. I went on his.
Real quick and say that I seriously, honestly love and respect all flat earthers and globe earthers if they're genuine. I mean, I don't love or hate anybody because of their understanding of the world. Now, I do know that genuine flat earthers have gone through a very personal and private and intimate process, and sometimes a bloody struggle with themselves to come to the unshakable, unequivocal conclusion that the Earth is not a spinning sphere, that the heliocentric model's wrong. And I feel like awakening people to this truth is really far from being just along for the ride, even if it's just one single person ever. And I see this as a spiritual battle, where each and every soul is really quite precious, and everyone was once subjected to the very same programming as all of us. And it's, in my opinion, we have to try to reach out to people personally, because the Flat Earth Awakening is a very personal process. It's not something that you're going to, like, for example, and I'm not dogging this at all, but it's not something that you're going to see on a billboard and then realize, wow, the Earth is flat. Like, it really takes a great deal of scientific study, observation, and really reconsidering everything that we thought to be true our whole lives in terms of theoretical physics. I mean, it really is quite a process to become, to transit from a globe Earth believer to a flat Earth realist. Now, in terms of something you mentioned, Jaron, like where it seems ridiculous to place whether it's Jesuits or Freemasonic or J-Trig or CIA assets speaking out about flat Earth, I mean, I totally disagree. I mean, look at just one example. During the women's liberation movement, one of the loudest voices was Gloria Steinem, and it turns out that she was funded and backed by the CIA the entire time, and she was speaking out about women's liberation. And so it makes perfect sense to me that they would do that, so as to not only gatekeep, but also to sort of control the conversation and to provide the public, not necessarily the grassroots movement, but to provide the public with a version of the truth, which is sort of an effigy or a straw man version of the truth that still allows for the status quo to continue with very minor adjustments without disrupting the beast system as a whole or rocking the boat very much. And so to me, it makes perfect sense that, quote unquote, they would put agents into place to commandeer the conversation, and also, especially in the days of the Patriot Act, to publicly associate flat earthers with all sorts of inherently, demonized and ridiculed groups of people, including, but not limited to, domestic terrorists, or even just, science-denying idiots. I mean, we already know that that's what they're doing, but the last thing that we want to do is give them any more excuses. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, IPS, is that the Masonic, teachings and stuff are available in a public library. I'm sorry, my friend, but that's either you just don't know what you're talking about, or that's a bold-faced lie. Every, at least, Grand Masonic Lodge has a library in it, and many of the books are specifically for Masons that are given to certain levels of Masons, which are either returned to the lodge while the Mason is still alive, or if he dies dies while it's in its possession, it's returned to the lodge upon his death. And so, there are lots and lots of books that are specifically for Masons by Masons that are absolutely not for public consumption. And, finally, I would just add to that too, that I just find it very difficult to trust somebody who has taken not one, not two, not three, but 32 different blood oaths, which basically say that they agree. I'm not necessarily saying you, but they in general agree to have their bowels removed, to be buried to the neck at low tide in the tidal waters, to have their bowels removed, to have their tongue cut out, to have their throat slit. I mean, and it gets just more and more bizarre to where they're like boiling your organs up to the higher level degrees. I just find it very and I've heard these stories from Masons where they say, oh, that's not enforced, but what's the point of the ritual? And, honestly, to most Blue Lodge Masons, I know a lot of Blue Lodge Masons, and they are decent, hardworking people.
And I came away with thinking, okay, welcome this guy to the awakening. Do I agree with everything that he does, the way he does it? I don't. I don't think that I agree with everything John does. I don't agree with everything Bob does. My goal is kind of to allow that to happen, that people are going to be different. I think it's something that's missing for some reason, that we all think we've got to be the same. We got to have the same beliefs. If you don't believe in the Holocaust, but I do, but you don't believe in dinosaurs and I do, I don't think it's an important thing, because people are different. They're going to have different opinions, and part of life is listening to everyone else. So I'll ask you in a moment, though, one question to start it off, IPS, and this is something that John brought to my attention through his video about you, and I think it's an important question to ask. And some other stuff was definitely some misunderstandings, I think, and but this one thing was a good point. So my opinion is and remains that if a Masonic Brotherhood or the Jesuit Order or anybody like that thinks that by placing people in places where they're speaking out about flat Earth, that's a good move, I think it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and they're dumber than I thought. Hey, thank you. But the reason that this has been hidden for so long, in my opinion, is because of ridicule, is because of subversion, is because of education or indoctrination. It did not get hidden by sending people out to talk about flat Earth. They didn't hide flat Earth by making people go out, talk about it, and then shoot up a school. Why? Because the last thing that anybody wants that's at the top of this is for anyone talking about the Earth being flat, because it's one of those awakenings that when you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's got to be the scariest thing in the world for these elites. So I could be wrong. I'm totally saying I could be wrong, but I'm personally not worried about the flat Earth. We have an uphill battle, and no matter who or what they throw at me, and I cannot see these guys putting people anywhere in a public forum to talk about it. It just doesn't make sense to me. So, flat Earth isn't going anywhere. In my opinion, it's spreading quickly. There's no curve, there's no spin, there's no globe, there's no moon landings, no 24/7 ISS. Oh, you know what? I'll show you that too if you want to see something hilarious. The ISS today, and it's been going on for, I don't know, I guess now about 15 hours, has not shown at all the Earth or the sun. It's pointed it to a weird. It's just so ridiculous that we're paying $53 million a day, and we can't even get a live feed 24 hours a day. Now we can't even get a picture of the Earth for the last 15 hours. I'll bring it up in 1 second. But so yeah, just to end it off, the one question that John brought up that I think is very important is, aren't Masons bound by an oath with the expense of your tongue for giving any secrets out? So my question to you to start off would be, how are you no longer a Mason? How is that even allowed? And does it mean that you have certain secrets that you can no longer divulge? I mean, that would be my question to you. Or how is it that you were able to break away from something that we're told has with it a oath that, can cost you your tongue?
Yeah, good question. And it seems to me that there's something of a straw man that has been created within the conspiracy or alternative research, where the word Mason or the Freemason has become kind of a universal bad guy, always a conspirator. They're all holding secrets, and they're all murderers who kill each other over secrets. And I'm like, show me the dead Masons. Show me the penal codes being enforced. And what I see with Masonry, because I've joined other groups because I've always been a truth seeker who's believed that you have to really, like gonzo journalism, you have to get into the story You can't be on the outside looking in. And so I've always been unafraid to actually go to the source. And so I've joined the Church of Scientology. I've joined the Abbey of Thelema, Builders of the Adytum, Freemasonry. And yeah, you do take oaths. But if you don't pay your dues and you stop showing up, no one hounds you down. And the secrets that you give or you're supposed to contain are publicly accessible from your local library. And my reason for leaving the lodge is, one, it's racially segregated, and two, the candidates, the initiates, the members, they swear to keep everybody who's not in the lodge ignorant of whatever secrets they do have. And that really runs contrary to my nature. I didn't join a lodge to become like some kind of elitist scum that looks down on everybody else as ignorant. Not quite the opposite, in fact. You might even say I had mercenary intentions because I was joining it to find secrets, to find the stuff that they were hiding, and to learn and then use it on my own. So it wasn't like I was looking to join a club. I'm certainly not like a club joining type of person. Same with Scientology. I was investigating Scientology by taking courses, reading their books.